In a world where magic is strictly reserved for the wealthy and privileged, a miracle begins in the quiet dark of a stormy night. Deep in the mountains, a rugged woodcutter named Vincent hears a strange sound echoing through the trees outside his isolated lodge. Expecting a thief or a wild animal, he grabs his heavy axe and steps into the shadows to investigate. Searching the yard with his weapon raised, Vincent finds no intruder at all. Instead, tucked away on the cold wooden floor, sits a basket containing a glowing newborn baby. Shocked by the sight of an innocent child abandoned in such a dangerous place, his fierce guard completely breaks down as he gently scoops the child into his arms. His wife, Olivia, rushes outside to see what is happening, only to find her husband holding the miracle they had given up on ever having. In that emotional moment, they decide to accept this child as a gift from above and raise him as their own son, naming him Arian Sharon. Little do they know, this boy is destined to shake the foundations of the interior magic world. 12 years pass, and young Shirone grows into a bright, deeply curious child who spends every spare second with his nose buried in books. While his adoptive father chops wood for a living, Shirone is fascinated by ancient legends of powerful mages who could call down rain and shape the earth. He constantly asks his father how someone learns magic, yearning for a world far beyond his humble village. However, living as a poor woodcutter's son comes with a heavy sting. The local villagers whisper behind Chirone's back, pointing out that he looks nothing like Vincent and claiming he was discarded because he was strange. Vincent overhears their cruel gossip and angrily clenches his fist, but he softens when he looks at his boy, assuring Chirone that no matter what anyone says, he will always be his true son. To lift Chirone's spirits, Vincent takes him on a trip to the bustling city of Creus in the Thormia Kingdom. The massive city is unlike anything Chirone has ever seen, filled with tall buildings, grand carriages, and endless crowds. Vincent drops Chirone off at a merchant store run by Old Martin, strictly warning his son to stay away from shady alleys and the noble districts. Chirone immediately makes himself useful by writing price tags for the shopkeeper, surprising the old man with his ability to read and write. Eager for any lead, Chirone asks Martin if he knows anything about magic. Martin chuckles and points across the street to a grand bookstore, telling him it is packed with ancient tales and knowledge. Excited, Chirone rushes into the shop to look at the magic books, but he immediately slams into the harsh reality of class prejudice. The shopkeeper snatches the book out of his hands, scolding him that expensive books are not meant for poor commoners. Chirone watches helplessly as a wealthy noble butler buys stacks of books without a second thought, treating knowledge as nothing more than a luxury status symbol. Refusing to let his dream end there, Sharon secretly follows the butler through the streets, determined to see where all those precious books are being taken. He watches noble children freely reading and laughing, making him wonder why a wall exists between people like them and a boy like him. But in his pursuit of answers, Sharon wanders straight into the restricted aristocratic district. City guards quickly spot the poorly dressed boy in the noble area and aggressively march over to detain him as a suspected thief. Realizing the danger, Sharon cleverly slips out of his coat when a guard grabs him and dashes down a narrow side street. He scales a high stone garden wall and drops onto the other side, hiding in the bushes while the guards run past. Catching his breath among the flowers, Chirone hears a calm, commanding voice lecturing right on the other side of the courtyard. He cautiously peeks over the ledge and realizes he has accidentally stumbled onto the grounds of the prestigious Alpheus Magic Academy. Inside, wealthy students are gathered around an elderly master, listening to a lecture on the true nature of magic. The speaker is Headmaster Meyer Alpheus, a legendary liege who asks his students what talent matters most in magic. While the aristocratic students guess money, hard work, or elite status, Headmaster Alpheus reveals that the true key is insight, the rare intuitive ability to perceive and accept natural laws as absolute truth. Chiron listens from the wall with wide, trembling eyes, feeling every word resonate deeply inside his soul. But right as the concept settles in his mind, Headmaster Alpheus pauses, turns his gaze directly toward the high stone wall, and calls out to the hidden intruder, asking to hear his thoughts. A wave of panic hits Shirone as he realizes he has been caught, and every instinct tells him to run before he gets into serious trouble. But looking down at the academy courtyard, he knows that if he turns away now, he will remain locked behind the social wall forever. Making a choice that will change his destiny, Shirone pulls himself up and drops directly into the Magic Academy. The noble students immediately spot the outsider lurking in their courtyard and start shouting for him to get out. Chiron stands his ground, terrified but unwilling to run away when he is finally standing in front of real magic. Instead of throwing him out, Headmaster Meyer Alpheus speaks to the boy with surprising gentleness. He asks what could possibly bring a poor commoner past the academy walls, and Chiron swallows his fear to state his heart's deepest desire. He wants to see magic. When Chiron mentions that he has read about magic in books, the aristocratic children burst into laughter at the idea of a commoner knowing how to read. Undeterred by their mockery, Chiron bows low and begs the headmaster to show him a real spell. The headmaster chuckles and offers a simple demonstration of wind magic. But what happens next is anything but simple. A massive, roaring hurricane erupts beneath the clearing, sweeping all the screaming noble students straight up into the sky. While the students go flying helplessly through the air, Headmaster Alpheus enjoys the chaotic ride before gently setting everyone back down on the grass. Chiron can only stare in sheer, breathless wonder at the casual power he just witnessed. Instead of being satisfied by the spectacle, Chirone's inquisitive mind immediately kicks into gear. He begins pressing the headmaster with intense questions about the true nature of magic, desperate to understand how reality itself was just rewritten. Headmaster Alpheus explains that magic is an operation of the mind that defies common sense to reach a deeper truth. He is thoroughly impressed as Chirone connects these concepts directly to the philosophical books he spent years studying back home. In his heart, the old headmaster recognizes Chirone's brilliant intellect and rare hunger for knowledge, yet a heavy sorrow settles over him, knowing that without money or noble lineage, this world will never grant the boy a chance. To demonstrate practical magical perception, the headmaster calls forward one of his top students, a girl named Shuamin. He instructs her to enter the spirit zone, the heightened mental state required to interact with magical forces. With her eyes closed, Shuamin flawlessly senses that the headmaster is holding 6 coins behind his back. The spirit zone expands a mage's awareness beyond physical sight, allowing them to feel every detail of their surroundings. Alpheus reveals the secret. To reach the spirit zone, one must turn inward, sense their own existence, and then erase their ego boundaries. He mentions offhandedly that anyone could theoretically do it, but few ever master the control. Chiron doesn't just listen, he immediately sits down on the grass to try it right there. The headmaster watches in amused curiosity as the untutored boy closes his eyes and begins attempting to erase his physical senses one by one. Deep inside his mind, Chiron strips away his body, his thoughts, and his earthly awareness until nothing remains but pure focus. He plunges into a vast, silent cosmic void where the boundaries of his self vanish completely. When Chiron opens his eyes, he tells the headmaster that he heard every sound in the environment at once. Alpheus smiles kindly, assuming the boy merely experienced a mental illusion of heightened hearing, and wraps up the outdoor lesson. As the class walks back toward the academy, Headmaster Alpheus glances over his shoulder at the lonely commoner boy left behind. He sighs with deep regret, wishing a prodigy of this caliber had been born with noble blood to receive proper training. Chirone scrambles over the stone wall and rushes down a quiet alleyway, clutching his chest as tears of overwhelming triumph spill from his eyes. He wasn't imagining things or lying to the headmaster. He actually entered the spirit zone on his very first attempt. After experiencing the raw spark of insight, Chiron feels as though his mind has been completely unmoored from his body. His consciousness expands past physical boundaries, feeling as if it is being scattered across the entire world like light. For the first time in his life, he touches something far greater than what a woodcutter's son is ever supposed to know. The sheer immensity of this sensation makes him shudder with overwhelming emotion. But as fast as it opened, his mind snaps right back into his physical frame. He tumbles out onto the cold stone alleyways of the city, breathless and bewildered by what just transpired. Before he can even process what he just felt, reality slaps him back down. A group of aggressive street thugs corner him in the narrow alley, furious that a poor peasant boy dared to bump into them. They demand compensation, towering over Shirone with clear malice in their eyes. Suddenly, a red-haired noble girl named Amy steps into the alley, watching the commotion with an amused smirk. The sight of an aristocratic girl entering their space makes the tough guys pause, but Amy acts as if Shirone is nothing more than cheap entertainment. When Chiron tries to explain himself, the thugs shove him to the ground and mock his poor background. They demand to know where his parents are hiding, treating him like garbage simply because he wears commoner rags. But as they stand over him, something inside Chiron snaps, and his glare sharpens with intense fury. The thugs do not care about his anger and immediately start kicking him while he is down. Chiron curls up on the pavement, enduring brutal blows as Amy silently watches the beatdown unfold. It is a harsh reminder of how cruel this class-divided world is to anyone without money or a noble name. Instead of stopping the beatdown, Amy taunts the thugs to take things even further, suggesting they check if this commoner kid has any value as a slave. Sharon cries out for his mother and father, completely helpless on the ground as the men laugh. As the men step closer to strip away his dignity, Amy starts to realize things are getting way out of hand. But on the ground, Sharon stops crying. A strange, radiant blue light ignites deep inside his eyes, and his mind suddenly goes completely still. In an instant, Sharon enters his spirit zone. His senses explode outward, allowing him to feel every movement in the alley, from a fly buzzing past a thug's cheek to the tiny rustle of rats behind the trash bins. Time itself seems to slow down as his mind maps out every detail of his surroundings. Deep within his memory realm, Shirone recalls the exact lesson Headmaster Meyer Alpheus was lecturing on moments ago. He reconstructs the mental formula for casting a wind spell, aligning his spirit zone with the magic structure he overheard at the academy. When one of the thugs grabs Shirone by the collar and yells in his face, Shirone slowly looks back up with glowing, otherworldly eyes. Amy gasps in utter panic, sensing the terrifying surge of power building inside this commoner boy, and screaming for everyone to stop. Shirone releases a monstrous burst of magic pressure. Violent shockwaves of wind explode out from his body, throwing the massive thugs into the alley walls like rag dolls and shattering the pavement around them. As the dust settles, the thugs lie groaning on the ground, completely finished. Amy stares at Sharon in absolute shock, grabbing him and desperately demanding to know where a commoner boy could have possibly learned high-level magic. Hearing footsteps approaching from the main street, Amy vanishes into thin air using her own high-speed movement magic. Sharon slips away into the shadows of the night, holding back tears as he runs home, feeling the bitter coldness of a world that despises commoners. The next evening, at the grand estate of the noble house of Karmas, Amy returns home still visibly shaken. Her father, Karmas Shakora, chuckles at her sulky mood, assuming she simply skipped her private lessons again. But Amy cannot stop thinking about the peasant boy who casually unleashed incredible magic in a dirty alley. She turns to her father and makes an unexpected request, asking him to introduce her to someone at the elite magic academy so she can enroll immediately. Looking back on that spring in the city, Vincent still remembers the sheer terror of almost losing his son. Shirone had vanished into the aristocratic quarter, returning with a vague story of being lost. But ever since that day, a quiet, burning determination took root inside the young boy's heart. Without any formal spellbooks, Shirone could only rely on instinct and what he overheard at the Magic Academy. Deep in the snowy woods, he closes his eyes and expands his mind into the spirit zone. In an instant, his consciousness stretches beyond his physical form, connecting directly to the forest. He senses every flow of energy and hidden fault mine inside a massive tree, mapping its structure with unbelievable clarity. Raising his axe, he channels that raw perception into a single fluid strike. The giant trunk splits clean open as brilliant magical light bursts through the air. Without realizing it, Chiron executed a devastating technique known as Thunder Strike. Watching from behind a tree, Vincent is struck speechless as his young son fells a forest giant with one swing. The sheer force of the blow rattles the silent woods like a crack of thunder. Yet Chirone takes no pride in what just happened. He knows that channeling magic by sheer luck will never make him a real mage without solid, fundamental knowledge. To truly unlock his talent, he needs structured spellbooks that are entirely forbidden to commoners. 3 full years pass, and Chiron continues to hone his mind through brutal daily discipline. Day in and day out, he sits in deep meditation, perfecting his entry into the spirit zone. Every swing of his axe is now guided by precise spatial awareness rather than brute force. 5 hours can vanish like seconds whenever he immerses himself in nature. He feels the groundwater rising through tree roots and the tiny shift of insects in the soil, becoming one with the surrounding wild. It is an entirely new world, exactly as Headmaster Alpheus described. As twilight sets over the mountains, Chiron gathers his gear and heads back toward the village. But as he nears his cottage, his heart stops at the sight of an ornate horse-drawn carriage parked out front. High-ranking nobles never visit common woodcutters without a heavy motive. Inside, his anxious parents sit across from a sharp, imposing man named Temeran. He is the assistant butler of the prestigious House of Ogent, one of the top noble families in the kingdom, and he has traveled all this way specifically to assess Chiron. Timurin evaluates the boy with cold scrutiny, demanding to know if a humble woodcutter's son can truly read. Chirone answers calmly, proving his literacy without flinching. Though surprised by the boy's sharp intellect, Timurin makes it clear that the job he offers comes with immense risk. The House of Ogent is secretly relocating 10,000 rare volumes from its private library, and Chirone is being offered 2 years of sorting duty. But Temeran drops a chilling ultimatum. If even a single word about these dangerous books leaks, Chirone and his entire family will suffer dire consequences. Seeing the terror on the parents' faces, Temeran smugly assumes Vincent put his son in harm's way out of pure greed for noble gold. He ridicules the very thought of a commoner daring to chase grand ambitions through reading. But the butler has no idea what truly drove this humble father to beg for an opportunity. Vincent had spent years tormented by guilt, afraid that Chiron's brilliant mind was being squandered in the lonely woods. Believing his adopted son deserved a chance at a real future, Vincent swallowed every ounce of pride to plead with noble houses across the region. Watching this arrogant noble threaten his boy and trample on his dreams finally snaps Vincent's patience. Refusing to sell his family's safety or swallow any more insults, the woodcutter rises in fury and roars at Temeran to get out of his house right now. Back inside the Vincent household, high-stakes tension explodes. A cold representative from a high noble house offers a contract, but Vincent refuses to let his son be treated like disposable labor. Before his father can kick the noble out, Chiron steps forward and agrees to take the contract himself. The representative coldly warns him of extreme risks, but Chiron doesn't flinch. Vincent breaks down in anger, desperate to protect Chiron from a world that mistreats commoners. Yet Chiron smiles gently, thanking his father for giving him a family and a chance at a real future. Overwhelmed with emotion, Vincent pulls his son into a fierce embrace. Realizing he can no longer hold Chiron back, he gives his blessing for his boy to venture out. 1 week later, the noble carriage arrives to collect Chiron. Signing his name onto the official contract, he takes his first real step out of the woodcutter's life and into high society. As the carriage rolls away from his village, Chiron holds on to the warmth of his parents' love. He vows to stay strong and survive whatever challenges lie ahead. Their journey leads deep into the Thormia kingdom, toward the grand city of Creus. The agent explains the staggering influence of the House of Ogent, a powerful martial family commanding the region. Entering the estate, Chiron is stunned by the sheer grandeur of high nobility. Sprawling grounds and massive marble statues serve as a constant reminder of the gap between his world and theirs. He is led straight to the Great Ogent Library, a massive tower filled with thousands of ancient volumes. His official job as an assistant is simple: organize and maintain the massive collection. To anyone else, it is grueling domestic work. But for Chiron, this is an absolute goldmine. Access to thousands of books is the precise key he needs to unlock magic. Starting his duties the next morning, Chiron realizes that organizing knowledge requires deep logical structure. As he categorizes books across subjects, he begins to see how all fields connect. He uncovers a crucial truth: history forms the central trunk of human knowledge. By mastering historical context, he can dramatically accelerate his understanding of everything else. Late into the evening, the head butler drops in to inspect Chiron's progress. After strictly correcting the boy's appearance, he warns Chiron to uphold the house's dignity at all times. Late at night, Chiron spends weeks painstakingly dissecting every line of a single book to master its concepts. Watching from the shadows, the butler chuckles and dismisses Chiron as an idiot, completely unaware of the genius waking up right under his nose. 3 months have passed since Chirone started working at the House of Ogent, sorting books for the Great Library. He is learning the ropes of noble households, but he knows better than to let anyone catch him reading the leaked volumes. Chirone is swept up in a frantic chase when Rian Ogent, the youngest young master, goes sprinting through the halls to escape his strict instructor. Dodging an angry swordsman is dangerous enough when you are just trying to keep your head down. Rian tries to hide beneath the very bookshelf where Chiron is sorting, leading to an awkward standoff between a furious noble heir and a nervous servant boy. Naturally, the towering instructor catches them both. After plowing through 82 books in 4 months, Chiron's relentless studying brings him to a monumental realization about magic. Scholars invent the theories, but mages are the ones who materialize them into actual reality using their spirit zones. Reed tracks Shironi down with vengeance on his mind, furious that the servant boy snitched on him and got him sent away for a month. He demands answers, but Shironi keeps his cool under pressure. Pushed to his limit, Rian drags Chiron out to the training grounds under the moonlight to settle the score in a brutal duel. He throws a wooden sword at Chiron, expecting an easy target to beat up. Rian lays down the law, forcing a servant to take 3 strikes from a master swordsman to pay the price for disrespect. Chirone realizes he has to survive this onslaught without breaking a bone if he wants to keep his future alive. The first strike lands with terrifying force, shattering the air and nearly knocking Chiron out cold. Rian grins with wicked anticipation, counting down the hits as the noble heir tests his opponent's absolute limits. With only one chance left, Chiron's eyes lock onto Rian's incoming final swing with terrifying clarity. He uses his sharp intellect and newly awakened mental prowess to read the opponent's stance just in time. Chiron proves that raw determination can outmatch years of elite training. By breaking down woodcutting into precise physical geometry, he manages to land a devastating counterblow against a noble opponent who never expected a commoner to fight back. The young noble is completely stunned, refusing to believe that anyone could learn swordsmanship simply by chopping logs in the mountains. But Chiron's practical upbringing gave him an intimate understanding of physical momentum that textbooks cannot teach. Flashbacks reveal the origin of Rai Ojent's monstrous talent, showing how the prestigious family bloodline bred prodigies who mastered dangerous techniques effortlessly. Yet Chironi's unorthodox methods mock the very foundation of aristocratic privilege. Humiliated by a commoner, the proud student demands a rematch with real swords in 1 month's time. The stakes are raised to the absolute maximum, forcing Chiron to dive headfirst into dangerous training to survive the impending clash. Panic sets in as Chiron realizes the terrifying reality of fighting with actual steel blades. He knows that one wrong move could cost him everything, but backing down is simply not an option for someone who fought so hard just to step through these academy gates. Back in the library, Chiron studies the Ogent family records to understand the immense wall standing before him. He learns about Rai's genius siblings, realizing just how wide the chasm is between a mountain woodcutter and the heirs of high nobility. Determined not to let his parents down, Chiron buries himself in dense tomes covering defensive arts and combat theory. His incredible mental endurance, forged through a harsh life in the wilderness, becomes his greatest asset in digesting advanced magic concepts. Pushing his body past its absolute limits, Chiron tears through grueling physical conditioning regimens. His teachers watch in disbelief as the relentless commoner shatters his personal records without a single complaint. The focus shifts to the foundational magic concept known as the schema, an imaginary body map that allows masters to control their internal selves with pinpoint accuracy. While mages use the spirit zone to look outward, schema users must turn their perception entirely inward. Rai Ogent attempts to map his own schema, easily entering a deep meditative state to visualize his internal network. His natural affinity makes the complex mental exercise look effortless, highlighting the unfair head start noble blood provides. Meanwhile, Shironi faces a brutal wall in his physical training, as his muscles scream under the pressure of trying to awaken his schema. Unlike the nobles who rely on innate talent, Shironi has to claw for every single inch of progress. Exhausted and bruised, Chiron collapses after another punishing session of swinging his practice sword. His instructor delivers a sobering reality check about the nature of geniuses, pointing out that true prodigies never have to struggle for what they achieve. Instead of being discouraged, Chiron embraces the harsh truth with a fierce grin. If natural-born geniuses fear hard work above all else, then unrelenting effort becomes the ultimate weapon for an outsider determined to conquer the system. The gap between raw natural talent and pure hard work is a chasm that swallows most dreamers whole. But Chiron is about to step onto a training ground where that rule is tested to its absolute limit. Facing an imaginary opponent, Chiron breaks down the geometry of combat. A swordsman's path is not just about swinging wildly, it is a rigid exercise in psychological warfare and calculated angles. For an entire month, he trains his body to cut in 8 precise directions. It is a grueling, solitary rehearsal that turns every muscle fiber into a metronome of lethal focus. Looking up at the night sky, Chiron realizes the vastness of the world outside his mountain home. To him, swordplay and magic share the exact same infinite horizon. Down in the training arena, the atmosphere turns electric as Chiron steps up to face a real challenger. His opponent stares in disbelief at the sheer pressure radiating from a kid who barely holds a blade. The spar explodes into motion with breathtaking speed. Chiron activates his synesthesia, reading the incoming strikes not just as physical movements, but as a symphony of shifting air currents. It is not that Chironi feels no fear of getting hurt. Rather, he has learned to conquer the illusion of danger. As the headmaster's lessons echo in his mind, he treats incoming strikes like stepping off a cliff. Blow for blow, the duel intensifies into a brutal exchange of heavy steel. Chiron's opponent throws everything he has into a barrage, trying to crush the woodcutter's son under sheer physical dominance. Every single strike from Chiron is forged from bone-grinding effort and relentless repetition. He refuses to give an inch, matching the Academy elite swing for brutal swing. Analyzing his opponent's flaws mid-battle, Chirones notes the glaring weakness in those oversized, flashy movements. While the rival relies on brute force, Chirones relies on cold, calculated geometry. He shifts his entire battle plan in an instant, executing rapid, basic slashes that systematically drain his opponent's stamina. The tide of the match turns as the elite fighter starts gasping for air. Flashbacks of a traumatic past flare up, threatening to derail the young fighter's concentration. But pushing past the psychological scars, Chiron channels every ounce of his relentless willpower. With a final, explosive roar of absolute determination, Chiron drives forward into the blinding light of his own swinging blade. The clash reaches a deafening crescendo as reality bends around them. A heavy thud echoes across the silent courtyard as one combatant crashes to the ground. Chiron stands victorious, but the shockwaves of this duel are only just beginning. The great debate of the Academy continues right over an open book, with the blue-haired student passionately arguing that a swordsman always beats a magician. Chiron sits quietly nearby, listening to every word as these privileged youths casually dissect battles of life and death. The instructor steps in to challenge their assumptions, picking up a book and asking the hard questions about combat strategy. He points out that actual battlefield conditions and military rank change the entire equation, leaving the students scrambling to defend their theories. Chiron observes the clash of egos with intense fascination, his extraordinary mind working overtime to analyze the combat philosophies. While the others argue about honor and physical prowess, Chiron looks deeper into the spiritual dynamics of how a swordsman confronts magic. Suddenly, a mental combat simulation explodes into motion right before their eyes, illustrating the terrifying speed of a sword strike against a caster's barrier. The visualization is so intense it leaves everyone gasping for air as they witness the sheer destructive force. The simulation concludes with a shocking outcome, proving that even a powerful mage can be dismantled if a swordsman closes the distance in an instant. Chiron gasps alongside the others, completely shaken by the brutal reality of the tactical scenario. The blue-haired student accepts defeat with surprising grace, admitting that if it were a real fight, he would have been finished. But the tension instantly shifts into pure comedy as the students start arguing over whether betting one's life in a training exercise is actually honorable. Chiron can't help but call out the sheer absurdity of calling a deadly duel honorable when it was just an instructor cornering a student. The blue-haired noble turns his attention to the poor newcomer, genuinely surprised by the audacity coming from the back of the room. Instead of getting angry, the young noble introduces himself as Ryan Ogent, completely breaking the ice and offering a surprising gesture of friendship. For an outsider like Chironi, making a friend among the aristocratic elite feels like stepping into an entirely different universe. Time skips forward as Chiron dedicates himself entirely to working at the Grand Ogent Library, crushing through thousands of books with frightening efficiency. His reading speed has evolved to a superhuman level, leaving the head librarian completely astounded by his progress. Rian drops by the library frequently to hang out, bringing a lively, fiery energy that contrasts sharply with Chiron's quiet, bookish dedication. Despite their different backgrounds, the two boys form a close bond, sharing laughs and debating magical theory between reading sessions. Chiron rattles off his incredible milestone of devouring 600 history books, leaving Ryan flabbergasted by how fast anyone can absorb that much information. They discuss the age-old question once more, but this time, Chiron's perspective has grown razor-sharp and deeply mature. The lecture on anti-magic shatters every preconceived notion Chiron has about mages. It turns out that absolute power always comes with a glaring weakness. Anti-magic disrupts a mage's spirit zone just like turbulent water throwing off a shark. Even the mightiest spellcaster is completely neutralized under its strange effects. Because anti-magic is essentially derived from a dragon's heart, it carries an astronomical price tag. Each piece of armor costs more than an entire kingdom's yearly budget. Chiron delivers a sharp, piercing conclusion that leaves Rion speechless. The ones who created anti-magic in the first place were none other than mages themselves. Mages are simply a pathetic class of people who sell the weakness of their own kind for enormous profit. Rion stares in disbelief, utterly blown away by Chiron's ruthless insight. 6 months later, Chiron's hard work at the library finally pays off. He has completed the massive task of categorizing all the relocated books ahead of schedule. Impressed by his dedication, the Academy extends his contract and honors his achievement. Rian rushes over with exciting news and a warm invitation to his family estate. Stepping into Ryan's sprawling family mansion feels like entering a different world entirely. The sheer scale of the estate leaves Chiron feeling tiny and overwhelmed. Ryan's personal rune looks more like a small lodging or a tactical training center. Swords and gear line the walls, showcasing a very different lifestyle from Chiron's upbringing. To pass the time, the two boys sit down for a tense game of cards. Rian tries to cheat, but Chiron's acute observation picks up every subtle movement. By focusing on the whole rather than small details, Chiron connects the game to his schema training. This mental exercise remarkably mirrors the concentration needed for a spirit zone. Suddenly, a delicate melody drifts through the quiet halls of the mansion. Rian immediately recognizes the sound of the piano and his older sister's playing. Drawn by the music, Chirone wanders into the room and crosses paths with Reina Ogent. The brilliant court pianist is not impressed by an uninvited guest trespassing in her space. Chirone finds himself unexpectedly invited to sit at the piano by none other than Lady Reina, the intimidating sister of his friend. Though he is totally out of his depth, her warm invitation makes it impossible for him to refuse. As his fingers touch the keys, something remarkable happens. Sharon does not just play notes. His extraordinary mind analyzes the mechanical rhythm and the acoustic reverb with absolute mathematical precision. He begins to mimic Reina's exact performance with uncanny accuracy. Lady Reina watches in absolute astonishment as the young outsider effortlessly captures the very feel of her music on his very first try. Shironi's mind sinks deep into the conceptual realm of schema, visualizing music as pure magic and light. His innate talent for insight allows him to bypass years of formal training and grasp the true essence of the art. Overwhelmed by the sheer intensity of his own breakthrough, Sharon snaps back to reality and apologizes for stepping out of line. But Reina is too stunned to care, recognizing that she is looking at a genuine prodigy. Suddenly, the peace is shattered by Rai bursting into the room in a full-blown panic. Finding his low-born friend sitting comfortably with the terrifying Lady Reina sends Rai's aristocratic sensibilities into absolute freefall. Rai scrambles to cover for Shironi, terrified that his friend will be punished for overstepping social bounds. To his utter bewilderment, Lady Reina reveals she finds the whole situation charming and officially welcomes Shironi as a friend of the family. The conversation shifts to Rai's upcoming certification exam, a brutal hurdle where thousands test but barely 30 pass. Rai carries the crushing weight of his noble house's expectations entirely on his shoulders. As the evening winds down, Sharon bids farewell to Lady Reina, completely unaware that his brief musical demonstration has left a lasting impression. He walks away with his head in the clouds, looking forward to our next meeting. Rai, meanwhile, cannot resist teasing his sister about her love life as they walk through the grand halls. One careless slip of the tongue later, Rai realizes he has crossed a line he can never uncross. A swift chop to the neck sends Rai crashing to the floor in defeat. Reina effortlessly sweeps past the groaning boy, treating his dramatic protests like the childish noise of a little brother. Elsewhere in the vast estate, the head butler Hannes receives a sudden and urgent summons from Lady Reina. Whatever she wants it handled immediately, setting off a quiet alarm behind the scenes. Far out in the snowy wilderness, Chiron continues his grueling physical training under the watchful eye of his mentor. Every drop of sweat brings him closer to mastering the foundation of schema, but danger is never far behind. An unexpected messenger arrives at the training grounds with urgent orders from the mansion. Lady Reina has requested the presence of her brother's temporary butler, pulling Chiron right back into the dangerous games of the nobility. Back at the grand estate, Chiron is brought before the family head in a chilling audience. Kneeling on the cold marble floor, he hears the final, terrifying verdict that spells absolute doom for an outsider who dared cross the line. The noble household is in absolute turmoil over Chiron's sudden intrusion, and the head butler demands immediate punishment. The strict social hierarchy of the aristocracy dictates that commoners cannot simply cross paths with nobles without facing severe consequences. Chiron refuses to back down, desperately calling out to Rian as tensions reach a boiling point. The assembled guards and staff watch in disbelief as a mere commoner dares to disrupt the pristine order of the noble estate. The head of the family views Chiron's presence as an unforgivable stain on their prestige. Documents and testimonies are brought forward to prove just how dangerous it is for a young noble to associate with a commoner. Rian steps forward to defend his friendship with Chiron, shocking the entire room. In this aristocratic world, genuine bonds between different social classes are treated as a dangerous heresy. The adults attempt to silence the boys and sweep the controversy under the rug to protect the family name, but the head butler decides that harsher measures are necessary to erase any trace of this scandalous connection. Chirone refuses to stand by while his friend is treated like disposable property. He steps into the center of the hall, declaring that he stands as Ryan's true friend regardless of the terrifying cost. The aristocrats mock Chiron's absolute lack of power and the sheer foolishness of challenging a noble house. They demand proof of this so-called friendship, assuming the common boy will fold under pressure. Cornered and outmatched, Chiron's mind races as he tries to find a way through the mental barrier before him. He taps into his exceptional insight, searching his memories for the guidance he desperately needs. Flashbacks to his training remind Chiron of how to look past the overwhelming details and see the core of the situation. He realizes this confrontation is not just an argument, it is a mental and physical duel. Remembering the hard lessons taught by his mentor, Chiron recalls the brutal realities of wielding a sword. Protecting a friend in this brutal world means putting everything on the line, including his own safety. Armed with fierce determination, Chironi refuses to play the coward and steps up to take the blade. He proves that his dedication to Rian goes far beyond mere words. With his life officially on the line, Chiron lets out a daring laugh that echoes through the grand hall. He stands tall against the noble opposition, ready to fight for his place by Rian's side. Chiron draws a real sword against his superiors, shocking everyone with his absolute lack of hesitation. This is no longer just a childish quarrel, it is a declaration of war against the noble system. Rian watches in awe as Chirone lays down his life to protect their bond. Grasping each other's hands, the two boys cement a pact that the rigid aristocracy can never break. Even as the surrounding nobles scoff at their youthful idealism, an unexpected arrival changes the entire mood of the room. A powerful figure steps in, leaving the arrogant lords completely stunned. The Ogent household is completely rattled when Chiron and Rian show up together, with Rian flatly refusing to abandon his commoner friend. The family elders watch with sharp eyes, measuring whether this impossible bond will ruin their standing, or if there is a deeper play here. The grandfather, a legendary general of Thormia and a three-grade swordsman, strides into the room with booming laughter. He finds the chaos utterly delightful, completely upending the tense atmosphere the other nobles tried to build. The family members start giving their official testimonies on Chiron's presence, weighing his actions against the honor of the Ogent house. Reyna and the second son Rai present opposing views, revealing just how deeply divided these nobles are over a simple boy. Even the deputy butler steps up to give his assessment, confirming that Chiron completed an immense library task way ahead of schedule. The sheer work ethic catches the room off guard, forcing everyone to reconsider what kind of outsider they are dealing with. Despite the impressive reports, the family patriarch ultimately puts his foot down and demands that Ryan cut ties immediately. To the aristocracy, a commoner friendship is a dangerous political liability that simply cannot be allowed to continue. Rian looks his grandfather dead in the eye and refuses the command, choosing his bond with Chiron over family obedience. Chiron watches in absolute shock, realizing his friend is willing to throw away everything for their partnership. Refusing to let Ryan ruin his future for him, Chirone takes matters into his own hands with reckless, staggering speed. He channels his inner resolve and steps forward to make a permanent declaration before anyone can stop him. In front of the entire Ogent family, Chiron publicly swears the sacred knight's oath to become Ryan's personal sword. The sheer weight of the ancient vow leaves every aristocrat in the hall frozen in utter disbelief. The grandfather bursts into roaring laughter once again, utterly fascinated by the sheer audacity of this commoner kid. Instead of punishing them, he approves the bond, recognizing a rare brilliance and spirit that money cannot buy. With the patriarch's blessing secured, the boys celebrate their bizarre victory, while the rest of the household scrambles to process the madness. Ryan feels the immense pressure of living up to the vow, while Chiron grins at the chaos they just caused. Reyna and the other family members immediately start plotting their next move, realizing Chirone's unexpected talent changes the entire political board. They pivot towards swordsmanship academies, completely miscalculating where the boy's true path actually lies. Chirone snaps back with unbridled fury, reminding them all of a crucial detail they completely overlooked in their noble arrogance. Chirone is not bound for a sword academy at all. He is going to be a mage, and he has already opened his spirit zone. Chirone is shining brighter than ever in class, impressing everyone with his sword-handling spirit zone. His instructor can't help but marvel at the boy's relentless dedication and skyrocketing talent. Suddenly, a knock at the door brings surprising news from the reception room. Chiron's family has arrived at the academy to see him, sending a wave of nervous excitement through the young mage. Vincent and Olivia rush forward to embrace their boy with tears of joy. They've missed him terribly, and seeing him safe and thriving in this grand place is an overwhelming relief. The head of the Ogin family makes a grand entrance, carrying the heavy air of aristocratic authority. He's here to discuss Chirone's future with the kind of cold calculation only a noble can muster. Ogent drops a massive roadblock right on the table. Commoners are strictly barred from enrolling in elite magic schools, leaving Chirone's dream hanging by a thread. There is only one unthinkable loophole to bypass the noble-only rule. The Ogent family proposes adopting Chirone legally so he can enter the academy under their prestigious name. Vincent reels back in absolute horror at the thought of losing his son to a noble house. The mere suggestion feels like having his flesh and blood stolen away forever. Chirone refuses to accept the deal, declaring firmly that he cannot become someone else's adopted son. He would rather give up magic entirely than trade away his true family. Vincent completely snaps, screaming at Chirone for treating his lifelong dreams so lightly. He demands to know why the boy would throw away his future over mere stubborn pride. Chirone opens his heart, explaining that his parents are the roots of his entire existence. Denying them would mean throwing away his soul and erasing everything he stands for. Driven by desperation for his son's future, Vincent breaks down completely. He drops to his knees, begging the nobles to take Chirone in as their own. Chirone sits down with his adoptive family to talk about a massive choice, but the conversation immediately turns into an intense emotional battleground. His father, Vincent, drops a devastating truth, making it clear that everyone already knows Chirone is not his biological son. Vincent breaks down in tears, admitting the sheer weight of raising a child plucked from the wilderness when they could not bear children of their own. The emotional floodgates open as Vincent confesses how deeply he cares for Chirone, despite the heavy doubts. Chirone refuses to back down, firing back with staggering intensity that shocks the entire room. He declares that his true dreams and ambitions cannot be locked away behind biological roots or family lineage. Vincent is reduced to a crying wreck, questioning why Chirone is pushing him so hard and accusing him of wanting to throw away the family that raised him. But Chirone hits back with the rawest truth of all. He never asked to be thrown away in the woods as an infant. The sheer weight of the argument shatters Vincent, who breaks down entirely and begs for forgiveness from his adopted son. He pulls Chirone into a fierce embrace, vowing that he will never give up on him. Later, Vincent meets with an old friend to discuss a colossal favor regarding the Alpheus Magic Academy. Vincent is ready to cash in every ounce of his pride to secure a future for his extraordinary boy. 3 days pass in a flash, and the time finally arrives for Ryan to depart for the Swordsmanship Academy. The household gathers for a bittersweet farewell, balancing heavy sorrow with the excitement of new beginnings. As the carriage prepares to roll out, Rian completely loses his composure and bursts into dramatic tears. He clutches onto Chirone, wailing over the fact that they have to part ways. Despite the waterworks, Rian fiercely vows to become the strongest knight and protect Chirone no matter what. Olivia watches on with a warm smile, deeply impressed by how remarkably considerate Chirone has grown up to be. With final goodbyes exchanged, Rian's carriage finally rolls down the road, kicking up dust as he heads toward his destiny. Chirone watches him go, carrying an unshakable resolve in his eyes. Ryan yells out his final encouragement from the moving carriage, telling Chirone to destroy them all at the Magic Academy. It is a monumental send-off for two passionate young men destined to break the structure of the world. High above the grand gates of the Alpheus Magic Academy, a white dove takes flight into the open sky. The prestigious institution stands tall, harboring secrets and power far beyond ordinary imagination. Inside the Academy's grand study, Vincent sits across from the legendary headmaster Meyer Alpheus. Vincent attempts to pull off a massive favor, pleading for special consideration to get Chirone enrolled. Headmaster Alpheus calmly sips his tea while flatly rejecting the shortcut request, noting that special considerations are never handed out to outsiders. Vincent refuses to back down, pressing the old headmaster on his stubborn principles. 4 years have passed since Chirone was sent away from the walls of Alpheus Magic Academy. Now, at 17, the woodcutter's adopted son stands ready for a second chance. Back home in the countryside, the parting is filled with tears and fierce pride. Vincent and Olivia send their boy off with tight hugs, watching him step into a carriage bound for a world of nobility. Inside the carriage, the ride to the academy is wonderfully awkward. Chirone sits across from the deputy butler, keeping his excitement tightly reined in as they approach the gates. Stepping out onto the grand grounds of the Alfier's Magic Academy, Chiron takes it all in. The deputy butler offers a sobering reminder. The tuition is steep, but the real cost will be surviving the sneers of noble classmates. Before they can even catch their breath, Headmaster Meyer Alpheus himself appears to welcome the new arrival. The elderly master remembers Chiron well and immediately whisks him away for a private stroll. Walking through the majestic corridors, the headmaster tests Chiron on the spot. Asking if he can enter his spirit zone, Alpheus is genuinely stunned to learn the boy cracked it open entirely on his own. They tour the sprawling campus where students rush past using actual magic for everyday tasks. Chiron's eyes widen at the sheer scale of wonder surrounding him in the academy halls. Moving from the beginner class up to the intermediate levels, the complexity of the lessons spikes instantly. Students are debating convection energy and refrigerant reactions like seasoned scholars. Shironi listens closely as a fierce red-haired student argues over a magic circuit, but something completely baffles him. He understands every single word they are saying, yet a fiery explosion erupts right in front of them. Chiron steps into the prestigious halls of Alpheus Magic Academy and immediately feels like he has entered an entirely different world. Every notice board tells a story of elite students and fierce academic competition. He spots Amy Karmas, the undisputed first-class ranker of the intermediate class, and his heart skips a beat. She carries an aura of intense, overwhelming talent that commands the attention of everyone in the hallway. Before Shironi can process the grandeur of his new surroundings, Amy's piercing gaze locks onto him with sudden hostility. She confronts the nervous commoner, demanding to know where someone like him learned magic. Amy unleashes a terrifying wave of hostile magic that knocks surrounding students completely off their feet. The raw, oppressive pressure leaves zero doubt about why she sits at the absolute top of her class. Shaking off the terrifying encounter with Amy, Chiron arrives at the third test site for his official evaluation. The examiners watch him closely, wondering how a commoner with no formal background managed to secure this special screening. The examiners question whether Chiron even knows the basics of magic casting. When asked if he has learned anything yet, Chiron honestly admits that he has never studied formal spellcasting a day in his life. Headmaster Alpheus steps in to explain that magic is the art of bringing knowledge out of your own mind. He instructs Chiron to step directly into the spirit zone and test his innate mental capacity. Chiron steps forward and activates his spirit zone, instantly releasing a brilliant surge of mystical energy. The examiners watch in astonishment as a vibrant spiritual field erupts around him with breathtaking intensity. The examiners begin testing Chiron's spiritual perception by asking him to read the numbers hidden within the spirit zone. To their shock, Chiron does not just read numbers with his eyes, he feels them directly through his mind. Chironi looks into the boundless expanse of his spirit zone and begins reading intricate mathematical constants straight out of the ether. He calmly announces the number pi, leaving the professional examiners utterly speechless. The spiritual measurements continue to climb past 30 meters, shattering all standard expectations for a beginner. Headmaster Alpheus watches with wide eyes as Chiron's immense mental capacity redefines the limits of what a student can achieve. The examiners frantically record skyrocketing density and sphere counts as Chiron's zone expands into incomprehensible territory. Headmaster Alpheus looks at the final terrifying results, realizing this quiet boy possesses a power that is truly dangerous. Chiron's entrance exam scores are causing absolute pandemonium in the staff room. The academy teachers are staring at numbers that defy every rule of magic they have ever been taught. His spirit zone density is off the charts, measuring numbers so high the instructors think it must be a glitch in the testing equipment. Thad argues vehemently against placing such an untrained commoner in a high-ranking class, calling it a dangerous liability. Ithella passionately defends the boy, insisting that raw potential like this shouldn't be stifled just because he started late. Headmaster Meyer Alpheus listens quietly to the bickering before making his final executive decision. The verdict is in, and Chiron is officially assigned to Class 7, an intermediate rank that bridges the gap between basic theory and real magical application. It is a massive milestone for a woodcutter's son who couldn't even afford a book. Stepping onto the prestigious academy grounds for the first time, Chiron takes in the sprawling campus of 33 buildings and 40 training centers. The sheer scale of the institution is breathtaking. The library is open 24 hours, and Chiron dives into studying with ferocious determination. Years of stolen knowledge and mental discipline finally have a proper outlet as he devours volumes of magical history. A shy classmate tries to approach him before practical training, highlighting how nervous Chiron still is around his peers. They head to the second combined training center for their very first joint session. Walking into the arena, Chironi reunites with Amy, the red-haired senior he previously crossed paths with in Crease. She looks stunning in her academy uniform, immediately drawing the attention of everyone around her. Instructor Athela takes the stage to oversee the intermediate class and immediately calls Chiron out to stand before his new peers. Whispers instantly erupt through the crowd as the other students realize who he is. Up in the stands, Amy recognizes him from the alley incident in the city and starts piecing things together. She remembers his incredible test scores and begins to look at the unassuming commoner with genuine intrigue. Suddenly, Amy's memories flash back to the terrifying aura Chiron accidentally unleashed during their first encounter. The sheer, crushing weight of his spirit zone floods her mind all over again. Amy stares down at Chiron with wide eyes, completely stunned by the realization of what kind of monster is hiding behind that polite smile. She drops a stunned exclamation as the reality of his terrifying hidden power finally sinks in. The Karmi's household is legendary in this kingdom for producing absolute geniuses. Their unique red eyes pass down a terrifying innate talent, the ability to recall specific moments they have lived through with terrifying precision. For them, reviewing information is completely pointless because their minds never let anything slip away. Amy Karmis is the youngest daughter of that prestigious bloodline and widely considered the brightest star in her generation. But beneath that haughty, noble exterior lies a secret she is desperate to keep buried. 5 years ago, she had a humiliating encounter with a certain commoner boy in a back alley that still haunts her waking hours. Sitting in the academy lecture hall, Amy spirals into quiet panic as she remembers how she attacked Chiron in the alleyway. Back then, she had no idea he was a peasant, and the sheer embarrassment of mistaking him for a noble makes her want to crawl into a hole. She relives every agonizing second of that past blunder, wishing she could simply vanish. Across the room, Chiron watches her with quiet intensity, wondering why the terrifying noble girl is sweating bullets. He has no intention of exposing her dark secret, but his mere presence is enough to give her a nervous breakdown. Amy scrambles to convince herself that there is no way he actually remembers that fateful day. The intermediate spirit zone class begins with Professor Ronnie Athela stepping up to the podium. She introduces herself as a certified grade 6 mage, ready to teach the foundational mental states of magic. Chiron locks in immediately, his eyes widening as he realizes he can actually perceive the invisible energy in the room. Professor Athela demonstrates the Spirit Zone's basic spherical form to the entire class. By channeling her mental state, she conjures a blazing fireball and hits a distant target with pinpoint accuracy. The surrounding students watch in absolute awe as she commands the raw flames effortlessly. The professor explains the golden rule of spirit zones. Magic cannot leave the designated boundary without dissipating. However, skilled mages can stretch their spirit zone forward to extend the range of their attacks. Shirone listens closely, absorbing every detail about how mental space dictates magical reach. Next, Professor Athela introduces the four core patterns of spirit zones: defense, attack, target, and deviate forms. Each shape serves a strategic purpose in combat, changing dynamically depending on the flow of battle. The students frantically take notes as she breaks down the complex geometries required for advanced spellcasting. She demonstrates the high-level deviate form, explaining how it leaves the caster's body behind to manipulate magic from an external focal point. Chiron stares in disbelief, trying to comprehend how a mage can separate their consciousness from their physical shell. The sheer complexity of the technique blows the entire classroom away. To prove her mastery, Professor Athela calls upon the class star and student representative to perform a live demonstration. Amy steps forward, trying to mask her lingering anxiety behind a composed, noble smile. The rest of the students immediately swoon, completely captivated by her overwhelming aura. As Amy steps up to the platform to show off her skills, her red eyes catch Sharon's gaze across the room. Her carefully constructed facade instantly crumbles as cold sweat breaks out all over her face. She desperately tries to push the terrifying memories down, praying she doesn't lose her composure in front of everyone. The Academy's star student, Amy, takes center stage for a stunning speed gun demonstration. The entire class watches in absolute awe as she effortlessly commands her magic. Every male student in the room is completely captivated by her brilliance. Amy showcases the true power of the target form with pinpoint accuracy. Her spells weave through the air like lethal ribbons of light, blanketing the zone in pure kinetic energy. Watching from the sidelines, Sharon studies every subtle nuance of her technique. Shironi realizes just how vast the gap is between an amateur and a prodigy, yet his analytical mind breaks down her rhythm piece by piece, dissecting how she maintains absolute control. He is learning simply by watching a master at work. With the speed gun test finished, Amy sweeps past the new students without a second glance. But as her eyes brush against Sharon, sudden panic flashes across her face. She recognizes the boy from her past and urgently prays he keeps his mouth shut. Class resumes with practical defense form exercises on the image zone. The instructor explains that condensing consciousness is the only way to survive a chaotic battlefield. Chiron steps up to the circle, ready to test his own latent abilities. Shironi steps onto the image zone, drawing murmurs and whispers from his upperclassmen. Amy watches in absolute disbelief, wondering what insanity has possessed the commoner this time. He stands at the center of the circle, completely unfazed. As Shirone unleashes his spirit zone, a massive wave of turquoise light erupts outward. The energy expands at an alarming, unprecedented rate, dwarfing standard measurements. The surrounding students freeze in absolute terror at the sheer scale of his power. The magic barrier reaches 20 meters and keeps climbing higher into the air. Panic spreads through the audience as they realize this novice is shattering every school record. Chiron struggles to maintain the structural integrity of his massive frame. Realizing his spirit zone is far too bloated, Chiron remembers Amy's lesson on intentional shrinkage. He forces his consciousness inward, attempting to condense the massive sea of energy into a tight, manageable sphere. But instead of shrinking, the magic reacts violently. The spirit zone explodes outward with terrifying momentum, completely defying expectations. It surges past 40 meters in a blinding flash of turquoise brilliance. The entire courtyard is swallowed by the overwhelming shockwave of his expanding magic. Standing amidst the roaring tempest of his own creation, Sharon reaches out to fold the chaotic energy. With surgical precision, he crafts a brilliant geometric jewel of pure defense. He has successfully manifested one of the 4 legendary forms on his very first day. Amy watches the display with mounting frustration and lingering trauma from her past encounters with the boy. She realizes this low-born nuisance is steadily growing dangerous enough to shake the entire social hierarchy. Her internal panic reaches a boiling point. Shironi has just delivered an astonishing performance on his very first day at the Alpheus Magic Academy, forming an image zone over 40 meters wide. The other students and teachers can barely believe their eyes at such raw talent, but not everyone in the crowd is smiling. Amy Karmas watches him with a dangerous glint in her red hair, deciding that letting someone like Chiron stick around is a risk she cannot take. Down on the floor, Professor Sienna Olifair guides Chiron through dissolving his spirit zone, explaining how shrinking the size dramatically increases its density. With that level of defensive power, most physical impacts and mental attacks will simply bounce right off him. Chiron beams with gratitude as the class applauds his incredible feat, completely unaware of the heavy jealousy brewing around him. While his classmates cheer, dark whispers and envious glares cut through the room from those who refuse to let a commoner outshine them. Amy watches from the shadows with a chilling, predatory stare that promises trouble ahead. The next day brings a brand new set of classes, and the academy halls are buzzing with anticipation for a very special instructor. When the doors open, none other than Professor Sienna Oliver steps in, the very same stern examiner from the entrance trials. Shironi is stunned to discover that Sienna is actually in charge of Class 5. and she specifically requested to teach this class so she could keep a close eye on him. Professor Thad might find her methods annoying, but Sienna wastes no time putting Shironi on the spot. She demands to know the theoretical chemistry behind cold energy and absolute zero. Shivering as the classroom temperature plummets, Chiron struggles to comprehend how a spell can manipulate energy without violating the laws of thermodynamics. Sienna calmly explains that if you divide tiny particles into a connection current, you can create temperatures cold enough to end a life. She challenges the class to understand how mages absorb and control that staggering amount of energy. Sienna breaks down the true secret of casting magic. Within their spirit zone, a mage is essentially a god. They exert influence over light, smell, and physical feelings, commanding the world from within. But even with that godlike ability, mages must fulfill specific conditions to activate their powers. Mages activate magic using two foundational pillars, omniscience and omnipotence. Omniscience is understanding the fundamental workings of the spell, while omnipotence is the power to activate it. Sharon's breath hitches as a massive realization washes over him from his past struggles. He finally understands why he could never use magic back in his village. He had no concept of omniscience and only trained his omnipotence. Without academic knowledge of the world, even the greatest power goes to waste. Professor Sienna warns the class that hard study is the only path to becoming a true mage. With elementary chemistry lectures underway, Shironi feels a renewed surge of determination burning in his chest. He knows he can bridge the gap and become a real mage through sheer effort. Days blur together as he throws himself into library research, studying late into the night alongside his peers. Running on very little sleep, Sharon pushes his body to the absolute limit just to keep up with the arrogant nobility. Yet every sleepless hour brings him one step closer to accomplishing his lifelong dreams. But as he walks the academy grounds, something completely unexpected happens to his feet. Sharon gasps as his body starts glowing with light, and he suddenly lifts off the ground, floating right into the air. Before he can figure out what kind of magical prank is lifting him, a cloaked figure drops down from above. He crashes hard onto the pathway, sending up a cloud of dust and leaves. Rubbing his sore head, Sharon looks up to see a familiar cascade of vibrant red hair falling into view. The hood pulls back to reveal Amy Carmus standing right before him with a wicked grin. The girl he met years ago in the forest has tracked him down inside the academy. Amy stares down at him with an eerie intensity, asking if he remembers her from their past encounter. With a flick of her wrist, roaring flames erupt into the sky, illuminating her terrifying smile. Amy decides there is no reason to wait. She is going to take care of Sharon right here and now. Amy Carmus stands frozen as Chiron reveals he remembers her from 5 years ago. She tries to deny ever ordering local hoodlums to strip him bare, but Chiron's deadpan recall makes her squirm. Chiron corners Amy with pure logic, pointing out her ridiculous excuses and the total hypocrisy of her noble stance. She's sweating bullets, realizing this commoner holds all the cards. Amy tries to salvage her dignity by demanding Chiron apologize to her for cornering a senior, but Chiron treats the conversation like a chess match, casually dismantling her authority piece by piece. Cornered and outmatched, Chiron delivers the ultimate checkmate. He threatens to spread rumors that she's a terrifying tyrant who terrorizes underclassmen unless she plays ball. With no way out, Amy accepts the terms with a trembling smile, officially turning Chiron's nightmare situation into an absolute win. The tables have completely turned. The next day arrives at the Alpheus Magic Academy, and Chiron wastes no time executing his new daily routine. He tracks down Amy at the library to deliver her very specific demands. Chirone hands over a cup of coffee with deadpan precision, leaving Amy mortified in front of her peers. She tries to maintain her cool, but the humiliation is eating her alive. As days go by, Chiron keeps up his relentless coffee delivery service, completely unfazed by the whispers of the academy students. He treats the entire ordeal like a minor chore. 10 days straight of public coffee deliveries have turned the campus upside down, with onlookers whispering about a legendary romance. Amy is at her absolute breaking point. This chapter is nothing more than a scheduled break notice from the creators. There is no story here, just a quick update before the real magic continues. Amy is having a thoroughly miserable week at the academy, caught completely off guard by Chiron's relentless coffee errands. Everywhere she turns, students are chanting for him and poking fun at her unexpected daily deliveries. She finally snaps, dumping a hot cup of coffee right onto the floor in pure frustration. Even with Chiron trying his best to apologize and smooth things over, Amy feels like her reputation is spiraling out of control. Elsewhere, Chiron is completely unfazed by the gossip surrounding him. He is totally focused on his studies and pushing forward toward the advanced class, leaving Amy to stew in her own mounting irritation. Back in the library, Amy tries to study away her anger, but the stray rumors keep echoing in her mind. She uses her special magic ability, Karmas, to review her memories and try to figure out why Shironi's calm demeanor bothers her so much. Analyzing the past 10 days of coffee deliveries, she realizes something shocking. No matter how irritating the situation is, Chiron's eyes never flinch. His emotional control is genuinely absolute. Exhausted from overthinking, Amy decides to call it a night and head back to her room. Walking through the dim academy corridors, she runs into a familiar face in the moonlight. It is Jake Ardius holding a cup of high quality coffee and wasting no time bringing up the gossip. He tries to flirt with Amy while casually insulting Chiron, assuming she shares his arrogant worldview. Jake's condescending remarks quickly cross the line into outright cruelty. He insults Shironi's background and boasts about his own noble family, expecting Amy to laugh along with him. Instead of playing along, Amy's temper flares up. She fires back, calling out Jake's toxic obsession with social standing and proving that her pride is not for sale to a bully. Jake loses his temper, threatening to use the power of his household to crush anyone who stands against him. He looks down on Amy and Sharon alike, completely convinced that money rules everything in the academy. Amy's expression hardens into something terrifying. Comparing Jake's hollow, panicked eyes to a dead fish, she decides to remind him just how dangerous a true talent from the Karmas household can be. With a sudden burst of magic, Amy unleashes a breathtaking four-way formation right in front of Jake. The sheer density of oxygen and sudden magical pressure instantly leaves him gasping for air and terrified out of his mind. Jake hits the floor, completely overwhelmed by her dominance and realizing he picked a fight with the wrong person. Amy walks away, leaving a shaken bully behind while vowing to settle scores properly. Days later, a strange calm settles over the academy grounds as students go about their routine. But that fragile peace is shattered when a mysterious letter arrives, carrying a very specific threat aimed directly at Shironi. Shironi thought the rumors would die down after a few days, but the academy halls are buzzing louder than ever. Everyone is whispering about his accidental romantic entanglement with Senior Shalrel, turning the poor boy into an instant campus celebrity. Instead of a quiet walk to class, Shironi finds himself dodging stares and tripping over his own anxiety. He just wants to blend in and study, but wearing the badge of a scandalous headline makes hiding nearly impossible. The peaceful morning is shattered when a threatening note lands in their hands with terrifying news. A shadowy group calling themselves Black Magicians has snatched Amy, demanding that Chiron show up alone at the 14th training field. A rival named Jake steps into the light, gloating over the trap and making it clear this is payback for Chiron's rising status. The bullies are playing dirty, weaponizing Amy's safety to break our hero's spirit once and for all. Senior Shalrel arrives and immediately spots the cruel handiwork of Jake behind this kidnapping scheme. Her fiery temper flares up because she knows running to the teachers could expose dangerous secrets about her relationship with Chiron. The stakes are impossibly high because involving faculty means risking expulsion and dragging Chiron's commoner background into the spotlight. Shalrel flashes back to her own painful past, realizing a scandal could ruin everything they fought for. Determined to protect her secret and handle the threat herself, Shalrel decides to face the kidnappers alone. She leaves strict orders for Chiron to wait, taking a massive gamble against overwhelming odds. Analyzing the timing on his pocket watch, Chiron realizes Senior Shalrel is walking straight into an ambush. The 1 hour leeway was designed as an insurance trap, and he refuses to let her carry this heavy burden by herself. Shironi bursts into a frantic sprint toward the mountain training field, pushing his body past its absolute limits. Distance becomes his greatest enemy as every second ticks away toward potential disaster. Catching up just in time, Chiron grabs Shalrel and channels raw magical energy to execute a high-speed photonize move. They launch into the sky like a streak of golden lightning, defying conventional movement rules. Flying through the upper atmosphere at breakneck speed proves violently chaotic as wind resistance batters them from all sides. Chiron shields Shalrel with his own body, fighting to maintain control of the blazing magical trajectory. They crash land near the 14th training field, battered but miraculously alive after that reckless airborne journey. Chiron immediately urges Shalrel to stay back while he handles the danger ahead. Shalrel panics as she realizes Chiron is planning to throw himself into the fire alone to protect her reputation. Her frantic protests echo through the trees, highlighting just how deeply she cares beneath her tough exterior. Activating his advanced spiritual perception, Chiron scans the mountainous terrain for magical residue and tracks. Glowing blue traces illuminate the path, revealing where the kidnappers made their move. The trail suddenly cuts off in the middle of a clearing, leaving fresh footprints that seemingly vanish into thin air. Chiron inspects the ground in sheer disbelief, wondering what kind of advanced transport could bypass physical terrain. Amy finds herself cornered in the woods as her ambush party surrounds her with arrogant grins. They think they finally have the upper hand against the fierce Academy Wildcat. Chiron is caught in the middle of their trap, but Amy refuses to show any fear. She greets her attackers with absolute coldness, daring them to make the first move. Without warning, Amy unleashes a devastating wave of fire that scorches the clearing. The surrounding boys scatter in pure panic as the heat becomes unbearable. Chiron reacts instantly, darting through the chaotic battlefield using his sharp instincts. He knows that fighting multiple opponents head-on is a losing game. Amy channels roaring gales of wind, spinning her body with terrifying speed and precision. She commands the elements effortlessly, leaving her enemies scrambling. Chiron tries to analyze her unpredictable rotation and figure out a weakness in her flow. Every spell she casts demonstrates years of intense combat experience. Deploying a wind cutter, Chiron slices through the turbulent air currents to close the distance. He aims straight for her blind spot while she is distracted by the others. With a wicked grin, Amy reveals her true schema and fires back with a brutal fire strike. The massive explosion sends Chiron flying backward through the air. Crashes echo through the trees as Chiron takes the brunt of the fiery blast, coughing up blood. Amy mocks his poor grades, reminding him he is hopelessly outmatched. Refusing to stay down, Amy pushes past her limits and starts channeling heavy, forbidden magic. Swirling purple energies erupt around her, creating an anti-magic zone. The sheer pressure of the forbidden zone drives everyone nearby to the brink of insanity. Amy laughs maniacally as her spirit power spirals completely out of control. Taking advantage of the chaos, her pursuers close in and finally manage to pin her down. One of the bullies grabs her arm, gloating that checkmate has arrived. The leader pulls out a sharp blade, whispering dark threats about marking her face. He wants to break her arrogant spirit once and for all. As the blade draws close, Amy's red eyes widen in pure disbelief as her strength completely drains away. She recalls how helpless Chiron must have felt, realizing she is trapped. Chiron finds himself cornered in the woods as hostile students close in around him with malicious intent. He realizes he is entirely on his own against a pack of arrogant nobles looking to make an example out of him. But instead of panicking, his brilliant mind starts calculating every possible escape route. Senior Chiron steps forward to take charge, flashing a dangerous smile that shows she is ready for a fight. She asks what these bullies think they are doing, standing tall to protect the newest addition to their academy. The opposing group just laughs it off, confident in their numbers and their overwhelming magical superiority. Chiron grits his teeth, knowing that brute force alone will never bridge the gap against veteran magic users. He decides his only path to survival is to buy time and disrupt their formations. Sparks fly as he channels his spirit zone, pushing his physical reflexes to the absolute limit. The enemy forces surge forward, closing the distance in a flash of glowing energy and menacing grins. Chiron dashes right through their line, leaving them momentarily baffled by his reckless speed. They quickly realize he is darting straight toward the heart of their chaotic spellcasting circle. Suddenly, a crushing wave of anti-magic floods the clearing, sending shockwaves through the air. Sharon's eyes widen in sheer disbelief as his consciousness begins to fracture under the sudden suppression. The oppressive field threatens to lock away his abilities for the rest of his days. Panic sets in as the mental feedback starts tearing through everyone caught in the radius. Sharel screams out warnings, urging everyone to get rid of their spirit zones before their minds break completely. But Sharon refuses to give in, gritting his teeth against the overwhelming mental static. Instead of backing down, Chiron decides to push the density of his spirit zone to an unprecedented extreme. The surrounding mages watch in utter shock as he tries to endure through sheer willpower alone. They mock him for acting like a top student, but his determination only burns brighter. A massive geometric barrier erupts around him, deflecting incoming attacks with blinding flashes of light. The sheer pressure of his condensed magic starts pushing back against the anti-magic field. Even his attackers stumble backward, terrified by the sudden reversal of fortune. The tables turn dramatically as Chiron's overwhelming waves sweep across the battlefield like a tidal wave. The very mages who sought to crush him are now sent flying into the trees. Screams echo through the clearing as the sheer force of his spirit zone overwhelms their defenses. Sharel watches in absolute awe as the cold, solid spirit zone continues to expand unchecked. She can barely process the fact that a newcomer possesses a field so dense it defies common sense. The enemy mages are left completely incapacitated, their powerful magic completely snuffed out. With the opposition scattered and groaning in pain, Chiron stands victorious amidst the fading magical glow. The surviving bullies stare at him in sheer horror, realizing they just lost against a supposedly puny opponent. Sharel steps up to join him, her respect for the boy skyrocketing. Just as the dust settles, a sudden surge of danger forces Sharel into a fierce counterattack. She unleashes a devastating burst of flame to protect their flank from a remaining threat. The intense heat lights up the forest as she delivers a punishing blow. Carried away by the adrenaline of the fight, Sharel pushes her schema dangerously far into unstable territory. Sharon notices the lethal strain on her body and desperately yells for her to stop. He knows that if she keeps using schema at this intensity, she will push past her breaking point. The backlash hits her instantly, draining all her remaining strength in a terrifying flash. Sharel collapses to the forest floor, her eyes rolling back as unconsciousness takes hold. Chiron rushes to her side in a panic, desperately shaking her shoulders to wake her up before it is too late. The dust settles after a chaotic clash, leaving Chiron and Amy recovering from the aftermath of a brutal encounter. But there is no time to rest, as the panicked students realize they need to scatter before the academy instructors catch them. Before they can escape, a blinding burst of fire magic erupts nearby, shattering the quiet grounds. Jake bursts onto the scene, furious and ready to punish anyone who dares cross him. Just as things threaten to spiral out of control, Instructor Sienia steps in to take charge of the situation. Shironi tries to explain the chaos, but the tension between the students and instructors remains dangerously high. Jake immediately starts twisting the narrative, pointing fingers and accusing Sharon and Amy of launching a targeted attack. His venomous words drip with malice as he tries to frame them for breaking the Academy's strict rules. Jake threatens to weaponize his wealth and status, boasting that he can spread rumors and ruin careers with a single word. He truly believes money makes him untouchable within these walls. Sienia has heard quite enough of Jake's arrogant posturing and decides to teach the spoiled noble a permanent lesson about power. With a wave of her hand, she unleashes overwhelming ice magic that freezes the air itself. The freezing torrent engulfs Jake, stripping away his arrogant bravado in an instant as the crushing weight of real magical mastery presses down on him. Sienia reminds him bluntly that the Academy is built on learning, not bought protection. Sienia challenges Jake's worldview, forcing him to confront what it truly means to walk the path of a mage rather than hiding behind a family crest. The harsh reality of his actions begins to dawn on him. Cornered and utterly defeated, Jake finally breaks down under the weight of his own hubris, offering a quiet apology to the teacher he tried to manipulate. Later, Sharon and Amy find themselves summoned to the counseling room to face formal disciplinary action for the incident. The instructors demand to know the full story behind the dangerous confrontation. With the tension reaching its peak, Amy suddenly blurts out a completely unexpected bombshell regarding her personal relationship with Chiron. The shocking reveal leaves everyone in the room utterly speechless. The Academy grounds erupt in pure cinematic panic as shadowy beasts corner Amy. Just as things look genuinely hopeless, Chiron drops in with style to save the day. Chiron pulls off an absolute hero moment, catching Amy in his arms right out of a fairy tale. The surrounding students lose their minds at the sheer romance of it all. Naturally, the entire academy is buzzing with gossip by morning. Everyone is convinced Chirone and Amy are the newest power couple on campus. Amy tries desperately to deny the wild rumors sweeping the halls, but her friend isn't buying any of it, teasing her mercilessly about her secret hero. Chiron and Amy sit down together for a quiet meal, trying to figure out how to handle the sudden attention. Amy insists they just stick to studying, but the tension is unmistakable. As they walk across the courtyard, Chiron maintains his calm, focused demeanor. Amy watches him closely, caught between frustration and begrudging admiration. Chirone heads off to class, completely unaware of the storm brewing behind him. The other students watch his departure with growing resentment. The whispers turn venomous as jealous classmates point out a harsh reality. Chiron doesn't study spells like everyone else, making his privileged status hard to swallow. The gossip spreads like wildfire across every classroom in the academy. Students feel deeply cheated that someone seemingly unqualified secured a spot through connections. Exam results drop, and Chiron's name lands right at the bottom of the rankings. The revelation sends shockwaves through the student body, fueling their outrage. Classmates openly vent their fury, arguing that an unqualified outsider only got in through nepotism. They feel their own hard work is being mocked by the Academy's favoritism. Chirone walks into the Spirit Zone practice area, completely ignoring the hostile stares. He takes his position among the crowd, ready to let his abilities speak for themselves. As Chirone begins to channel his energy, the sheer scale of his Spirit Zone stuns everyone present. It is massive, chaotic, and totally different from standard magic practice. Professor Ethella steps in to check on his eccentric training method. She points out how his Spirit Zone behaves against normal rules, pushing him toward the next level of control. Sharona absorbs the instructor's guidance with total focus, ready to test his limits once again. But while he trains in the open, angry eyes are watching from the shadows. Chirone is stepping up to prove himself in front of his peers, attempting the difficult Spirit Zone techniques in class. His classmates watch closely, whispering doubts as he prepares to shift his consciousness. With quiet determination, Chiron decides to give the Image Zone a serious try. The surrounding students murmur in disbelief, wondering if he is just putting on a show for his classmates. He activates his defense form, gathering immense spiritual power around him with dazzling intensity. The sheer scale of his formation stuns the onlookers, proving his fundamental grasp is far beyond ordinary. Pushing further, Chiron attempts the deviate form despite the immense mental strain it causes. His unstable spirit zone begins to fluctuate wildly, throwing off the center of focus and alarming everyone watching. Overwhelmed by heavy doubts and the silent judgment of the crowd, Chiron nearly collapses under the pressure. The mental burden of trying to measure up in this elite academy feels entirely crushing. Rejecting the intrusive thoughts holding him back, Chiron reminds himself why he fought so hard to get here. He didn't come this far to back down from a challenge, and he ignites his magic with fierce resolve. A massive surge of anti-magic erupts from Chirone, stunning the entire classroom with its raw, destructive power. The teachers file an official incident report, realizing his conscious capacity rivals multiple people combined. Teacher Sienna recognizes his incredible potential and discusses an unconventional path forward with him. Impressed by his rapid progress, she proposes a major leap in his education. The next day in class, a major announcement leaves the students completely speechless. Chiron is being officially promoted straight to Class 5, skipping multiple grades in a single bound. Instantly, outrage breaks out among the noble students who refuse to accept a commoner's rapid rise. One classmate stands up to loudly protest, arguing that skipping classes without casting a single real spell is blatant favoritism. At the Alpheus Magic Academy, whispers and rumors are starting to swirl around Chiron. While some students gossip about his background, the teachers are taking a much closer look at his unusual study habits. Deep into the night, long after his classmates are fast asleep, Sharon is still awake, poring over dense academic texts. His mind operates on a completely different level, absorbing massive amounts of information while others rest. Despite the cold isolation and the subtle hostility from aristocratic peers, Chiron remains entirely focused on his ultimate goal. He is not here to make friends. He is here to become a true mage. Late at night, a knock echoes at Chiron's door. It is teacher Sienna, coming to check on her most peculiar student and review his unprecedented academic records. Sienna pulls up Chirone's grades and discovers something astonishing. His scores across every single subject are not just passing, they are identical, showing a terrifyingly balanced comprehension of all theoretical fields. When Sienna asks about his social life and the whispers of bullying, Chirone calmly brushes it off. He understands that in a school of 40 elite minds, true understanding will always outlast petty social friction. Impressed by his sheer dedication and intellect, teacher Sienna takes a bold stance at the faculty meeting. She officially proposes that Chirone be granted an early promotion. The faculty room instantly erupts into fierce debate. Promoting a student who has not yet cast a traditional spell shocks the more conservative instructors. Teacher Thad strongly opposes the motion, arguing that pushing a student too fast without practical spellcasting ability sets a dangerous precedent and fuels unfair jealousy among the nobles. Sienna fires right back, refusing to let Thad dismiss Chiron's immense theoretical genius. The argument gets heated, exposing the deep ideological divide within the Academy's leadership. Headmaster Alpheus steps in to restore order with a knowing smile. Recognizing both sides of the argument, he decides on a compromise that will test Chiron in the most public way possible. The next morning, a shocking notice appears on the Academy board. To appease the outraged students who complained about favoritism, the headmaster drops a bombshell rule change. Instead of just Chiron getting a free pass, the headmaster declares that all students in Class 7 are allowed to take the grueling promotion examination. The catch? The test subject is advanced teleportation magic, a spell so notoriously difficult that even upperclassmen have landed in the hospital trying to master it. Chiron stares down the notice as the true trial begins. The Academy hallway buzzes with a sudden notice that changes everything for Class 7. Chiron reads the bold announcement about promotion exams, realizing he might actually skip straight to Class 5. But the catch is brutal. The exam requires mastering a teleportation spell, a dangerous feat even for upperclassmen. Word of Chiron's impossible goal spreads through the upper tiers of the Academy like wildfire. Students from advanced classes gossip in the corridors, baffled that an outcast from Class 7 would even attempt teleportation. Some mock his ambition, while others whisper that he is merely acting out to impress his peers. Amy overhears the mocking whispers, and her temper instantly boils over into pure rage. She storms through the courtyard, ready to unleash hell on anyone disrespecting Chiron. Her fierce protectiveness flares up, though she tries to convince herself it is strictly about academic pride. Shielded by the shadows of night, Amy sneaks directly into Chiron's dormitory room to check on him. She bursts in with all the subtlety of a collapsing mountain, demanding answers about the promotion exam. Chiron blinks in total confusion as his fiery classmate practically vibrates with anxious energy. Before Amy can dig her heels in further, teacher Sienna steps out from the background with a cup of tea. The sudden appearance of a faculty member turns Amy's bravado into sheer panic as she scrambles for an excuse. Sienna remains remarkably calm, explaining she is simply here to offer tutoring advice. Amy's jealousy flares immediately upon realizing Sienna has beaten her to the punch in helping Chiron. She slams her hands down, demanding to know why Sienna is meddling in her personal territory. Sienna responds with icy composure, reminding Amy who actually holds the title of teacher. Sienna breaks down the intimidating theory behind the teleportation exam for Chiron. She explains how the photonization process breaks the body down to sub-light speeds to cross spatial coordinates. It is a terrifying concept, but Chiron's brilliant mind absorbs every technical detail instantly. The practical exam venue is revealed to be a terrifying bridge suspended 1,000 meters above ground level. Sienna explains that candidates must race across this yawning chasm using teleportation without hitting safety barriers. The sheer height makes Chiron's stomach drop, realizing one wrong calculation means disaster. Chirone looks out at the impossible chasm, feeling the crushing weight of facing the entire advanced class alone. But Sienna refuses to let him shoulder the burden by himself anymore. She officially takes charge of his training, determined to prove that a Class 7 student can break the system. The competitive spark between Sienna and Amy ignites right in front of a bewildered Chiron. Amy refuses to be sidelined and demands her right to teach him, creating a hilarious tug of war for the boy's attention. Chiron deadpans that he will simply study on his own, sending both teachers into a comical panic. Chiron finds himself backed into a corner when Amy presents him with an impossible choice. He has to decide whether he is taking lessons from her or sticking with his current teacher. Naturally, Chiron tries to dodge the question entirely. Amy is not about to let him slip away so easily and immediately calls out his avoidance. She points out that taking the promotion exam alone without a tutor is practically setting himself up to fail. But Chiron stays stubbornly firm on doing things his own way. Seeing how dead set he is, Amy finally backs down and lets him have his independence. She even offers to overlook him sneaking through her window if he ever needs to mediate his opinions. With a sigh of relief, Chiron successfully survives the interrogation. Once they are alone, the conversation shifts to the real reason Amy kept her distance. Chiron bluntly asks why she had been avoiding him in the hallways. Amy gets flustered, her tough exterior cracking as her pride takes center stage. Amy breaks down in a coughing fit of sheer embarrassment as Chiron lays out the truth. He admits she was his primary goal when he first entered the academy, having seen her name sitting right at the top of the list. That sudden compliment sends her emotional state into a tailspin. Realizing what a formidable rival she has on her hands, Amy quickly shifts from flustered to fiercely competitive. She warns him not to get comfortable just because she gave him a compliment. If he wants to catch up to her, he will have to run for his life. Amy promises to make his life a living test if he falls behind her pace. She vanishes into the night, leaving Chiron alone with a ticking clock and a massive mountain to climb. With only 1 month left until the promotion exam, the pressure is officially on. The next day, Chiron dives headfirst into the archives to tackle the daunting theoretical side of magic. He stacks armloads of heavy calculation texts, realizing just how vast the gap is between himself and academy students who have studied since childhood. While Chiron grinds away in the library, elite students like Mark Slider breeze through practical exams with private tutoring. Mark easily demonstrates teleportation, basking in the praise of his advisory instructor while looking down on self-studying outsiders. Mark and his peers fully expect Chiron to crash and burn trying to learn complex spells entirely from books. They whisper among themselves, betting that a commoner with zero baseline training cannot possibly master teleportation on his own. Unfazed by the heavy doubts of the aristocracy, Chironi locks himself in his personal training ground to put theory into practice. He focuses his mind inward, integrating the photonization theory directly into his spirit zone. Energy surges around him as a brilliant cyan light shatters the darkness of the courtyard. Chironi's eyes snap open with glowing power as he whispers the magic words to activate his spell. Traditional mages are taught that humans cannot calculate the value of light, but Chiron's exceptional mental state bypasses pure math through sheer sensory perception. As the spirit zone expands, his extraordinary breakthrough stuns even the oldest observers, setting the stage for an explosive promotion exam. Chironi is deep in the zone, feeling every blade of grass and leaf in the vicinity through pure extrasensory awareness. It is a terrifyingly deep mental state where an exceptional mage can calculate the value of everything around them. But for Chironi, this mental training is just the beginning of unlocking his true potential. The countdown to the teleportation test is ticking down rapidly. With only days left until evaluation, Chiron's first attempts at teleporting have completely failed. Refusing to give up, he decides to test the dangerous spatial magic directly on his own body. Pushing himself to the absolute limit, Chironi triggers a chaotic burst of spatial distortion. The recoil sends him crashing violently into the ground, screaming in pain as the intense physical feedback rattles every bone. But even as he collapses, his brilliant mind is already analyzing the tiny margin of error. Day by day, the countdown drops lower and lower while Shirona relentlessly pushes through the agony. He refuses to stop until his calculations match reality down to a fraction of a millisecond. Every failure leaves him bruised and battered, but what remains is absolute mastery forged within his own flesh and bone. Midnight hits under the pale moonlight as Chiron stumbles through the academy grounds, completely exhausted. Every muscle aches and his hands tremble with fatigue from continuous spellcasting. Yet, right before the eve of the test, he forces his weary body to stand and try just one more time. With a fierce roar, he channels his focus and initiates a full teleportation jump. A blinding flash of golden light erupts across the clearing, tearing through the air with deafening force. When the dust finally settles, Chiron lies flat on his back, breathless but victorious. He actually pulled it off. Back in the classroom, the noble students continue to whisper and scheme behind closed doors. Mark and his cronies plot against Chironi, confident that an underdog from Class 7 stands no chance of surviving the upcoming trials. They plan to use every dirty trick in the book to disqualify him. Mark corners Maria and threatens her with arrogant cruelty, demanding she stay out of his way. The toxic hierarchy of the academy rears its ugly head as the upper-class students flex their perceived superiority over anyone below them. They truly believe power is something only inherited by bloodline. The strategizing is ruthless as Mark assigns specific roles to his team to block Chiron at every turn. Their goal is simple: ensure Chiron fails the teleportation test before he ever reaches the finish line. But they are severely underestimating how far a dedicated woodcutter's son has climbed. The day of the teleportation evaluation finally arrives, drawing massive crowds of curious spectators and judges. Students from various classes gather around the treacherous terrain, whispering about the dangerous course ahead. The tension in the air is thick enough to cut with a knife. The participants assemble at the starting line, staring across a massive, impossible chasm that looks far too wide to clear. Even the arrogant upperclassmen gasp when they realize the sheer scale of the obstacle before them. There is no traditional bridge. Teleportation is the only way across. As the final countdown begins, the judges look on from their elevated platform, ready to grade every single movement. Spectators adjust their viewing tools from afar, eager to watch the anticipated disaster unfold. Everything is set for the ultimate test of spatial magic. Panic suddenly ripples through Mark's group when they realize someone crucial is missing from the starting area. Mark frantically searches the crowd for Chiron, only to find an empty spot where the young mage should be standing. Has their primary target backed out at the very last second? The Magic Academy grounds are buzzing with absolute confusion as teachers and students search everywhere for Chiron. Nobody can figure out where the missing kid has gone, and the panic is starting to set in. Up on the rocky cliffs, the students look down at the sheer drop with total disbelief. They are told they have to teleport across this massive gap, but for beginners, it looks like an impossible nightmare. The instructors do not sugarcoat the danger of the exams either. They remind everyone that severe injuries are practically guaranteed if you mess up your spells on these treacherous drop-offs. Meanwhile, Chironi is sprinting through the forest tracks, huffing and puffing as he pushes his battered body to the absolute limit. He refuses to miss his chance at the exam, no matter how much pain he is in. He bursts out of the tree line just in time, staggering right up to the instructors while gasping for air. They are stunned to see him show up in such rough shape, but the clock waits for no one. With a wave of the instructor's hand, the early promotion exam for Class 7 officially begins. The countdown starts right away, and the tension on the cliffside shoots through the roof. Magical energy flares across the terrain as students trigger their spells and launch themselves into the air. They rely on calculated teleportation jumps to bridge the terrifying gap over the abyss. As the seconds tick away on the giant clocks, the participants execute their strategies across the floating paths. Some panic and lose their footing, while others push forward with ruthless focus. The kids at the front of the pack juggle complex spatial calculations on the fly to maximize their teleport distance. Every single turn requires precise timing to avoid tumbling into the empty sky. Chaos erupts as magical blasts ripple through the air, sending shockwaves that throw off the weaker competitors. Students scream in frustration as their carefully planned jumps start falling apart. Mark Slider and the frontrunners keep chaining their teleport bursts, desperate to maintain their lead. But the physical and mental strain is pushing everyone right up against their absolute limits. Shirone stands at the edge of the ultimate mental test, staring down a sheer cliff that exists only in his mind. The Academy instructors watch closely, knowing that standard magic won't save anyone here if they freeze up. Without casting a single conventional spell, Chiron simply steps off the ledge into empty space. The spectators gasp in absolute shock as he plunges toward the valley below with zero hesitation. Channeling pure mental energy, Chiron activates his photonization technique mid-air. He rockets forward past the other students, turning a terrifying descent into a high-speed masterclass. The sheer shockwave of his acceleration catches everyone off guard, shattering the rigid pacing of the exam. Observers in the stands can barely believe their eyes as the underdog cuts through the sky. Up ahead, Mark feels the intense pressure of Chiron closing the gap at an impossible speed. Panic sets in as Mark realizes his carefully planned routine is about to be completely derailed. Further back in the pack, the trailing students crumble under the mental weight of the descent. Without enough mental fortitude to overcome their terror, they fall short and face elimination. The evaluation board tallies the heavy toll of the trial as dozens of hopefuls drop out. The ruthless nature of the academy proves that raw talent alone isn't enough to survive. Back in the race, Mark sweats bullets as Sharon pulls up right beside him. The distance between them vanishes, turning a controlled team test into an intense, high-stakes rivalry. Instructors watch the monitor in stunned silence as Sharone maintains an unnaturally steady mental routine. Utilizing deep subconscious compulsion, he operates his magic with the precision of a machine. Headmaster Meyer Alpheus observes the boy with quiet intrigue, recognizing the terrifying depth of Sharon's talent. Turning a subconscious technique into a conscious weapon is a feat that defies normal logic. Things instantly heat up on the Academy grounds as Chiron finds himself locked in a high-speed magical clash. Dodging by a hair, he realizes just how narrow his margin for error really is. Running on pure adrenaline, Chironi pushes his mental focus to the absolute limit. Every second counts, and a single slip in concentration means total failure. Watching from the sidelines, the other students analyze the chaotic movement patterns. They quickly realize this collision was no accident, but a calculated tactical move. Mark takes an arrogant lead, reveling in his own supposed genius as he blasts forward. He assumes victory is already his, completely underestimating Sharon's relentless drive. Suddenly, alarm bells ring out across the entire facility as the system hits a dangerous threshold. The magical engine breaches level 10, creating an emergency scenario nobody anticipated. Panic ripples through the faculty as leaders scramble to halt the test before someone gets seriously hurt. Meyer Alpheus and his staff realize the situation is spinning wildly out of control. Away from the main arena, a shadowy figure storms toward a heavily locked control room. Whoever is behind this sabotage is determined to keep the test running no matter the cost. Confronting the person hiding inside, the intruder demands answers for the dangerous tampering. The trapped student breaks down, revealing a desperate submission to the harsh academy system. The magic exam turns into an absolute disaster in seconds, as the advanced students start tearing through the obstacle course with reckless abandon. Headmaster Meyer Alpheus watches from the sideline, his sharp gaze noting just how blinded these talented kids are by their own competitive greed. Chiron enters the trial zone, instantly feeling the crushing weight of the maze and the blinding speed of the incoming traps. He knows he cannot brute force his way through like the advanced class, so he relies entirely on his hyper-analytical mind to map out the danger. All around him, the environment shifts into a nightmarish labyrinth of slamming walls and flying projectiles. Chiron pushes his physical and mental limits to dodge the chaos, treating the exam not as a race against others, but as a puzzle he has to solve to survive. Watching from above, the teachers debate the toxic culture of the academy, where students are encouraged to step on each other to climb higher. One instructor breaks down in tears, remembering the ordinary students who were left behind by a system built only for natural geniuses. The conversation exposes the ugly truth of the Academy's philosophy, where magical talent is weaponized to divide the students into castes. But Shirone refuses to get bogged down in the politics, focusing entirely on the task right in front of him. Suddenly, a horrifying cry echoes through the course as another student gets trapped and overwhelmed by the hazards. Panic sets in as the onlookers realize someone is in genuine peril, completely cut off from help. Instead of running past to secure his own score, Sharon completely alters his trajectory to dive straight into the danger zone. With astonishing reflexes, he launches himself forward to pull the trapped competitor out of harm's way just in the nick of time. The spectators in Class 7 watch in absolute shock as Chiron pulls off a rescue that nobody expected from a commoner. Even the skeptical instructors are forced to reevaluate the boy they previously wrote off as an outsider. Back inside the maze, Shironi assesses the shifting patterns of the traps with cool precision, realizing that moving forward isn't always the only answer. Sometimes, retreating and recalculating is the true key to survival. The perspective of the other students begins to shift dramatically as they realize Chiron's relentless training wasn't just for his own glory. They finally understand that his unique approach to magic comes from a place of genuine understanding rather than arrogance. Headmaster Meyer Alpheus observes the heartwarming turnaround with a knowing smile, stepping in to take full responsibility for the unorthodox exam turn. He knows this trial has exposed the flaws in the system, and Chiron is proving to be the catalyst for real change. Chiron steps onto the maze exam grounds, facing a shifting trap of descending pillars. He draws on his unique mental state, diving straight into the chaos. The obstacles move with an unreadable pattern, but Chiron refuses to hesitate. He enters a deep mental trance, reading the geometry of the space before him. By feeling out the entire layout, Chiron calculates his trajectory in fractions of a second. This is his deviate form in action, turning the maze into a solvable equation. Explosions ring out as energy blasts collide with the pillars all around him. Chiron weaves through the onslaught with breathtaking precision, dodging every trap by a hair. The spectators watch in absolute shock as he carves a path through the impossible obstacle course. High above, the instructors study the boy's bizarre mental readings with growing astonishment. Headmaster Meyer Alpheus notes that Chiron lacks any ordinary sense of satisfaction or craving. His spirit zone density is soaring past normal limits, locked in a hyper-focused trance. Chiron breaks down the narrow gaps between the falling pillars into microscopic intervals. He teleports in rapid succession, cutting down his travel distance to bypass the deadly crush. Every single movement is calculated down to the smallest detail. A massive energy beam fires across the testing ground, forcing Chiron into an extreme evasive maneuver. He shatters the beam's path into tiny fragments, bending light itself in a dazzling display of spatial manipulation. The crowd gasps as his light trails warp right before their eyes. The instructors break down the impossible math behind Chiron's feat. He split teleportation intervals into 1/1000th of a fragment, achieving what books claim is mathematically undoable. It is the textbook definition of true insight in motion. Suddenly, the atmosphere turns pitch black as a terrifying shadow overtakes the arena. Professor Thad unleashes a colossal dark construct known as the Dragon's Labyrinth. The sheer scale of the magic plunges the entire courtyard into panic. Caught in the backlash of the massive dragon construct, Chiron is tossed violently through the air. In his terror, his survival instincts kick into overdrive as he desperately curves away from the crushing jaws. He pleads for his life in his mind, fighting to stay conscious. Professor Athela arrives on the scene and immediately chews out Thad for losing control of his spell. The other faculty members rush forward as they realize the test mechanisms are still active and spiraling out of control. Chiron is trapped in the middle of a catastrophic faculty mishap. Chiron is pulled safely from the wreckage while the Academy watches in stunned silence. The massive dark dragon spell fades away, leaving the courtyard in a hushed awe. Headmaster Meyer and the staff look on as the clock ticks down the final moments of this insane exam. Time is running out in the dragon's maze as Chirone pushes his mind to absolute breaking point. With the terrifying pressure closing in from every side, he refuses to accept defeat. He is not done yet. Slowing his perception down to fractions of a second, his consciousness splits into pure calculation. He maps out every single fork in the magical path ahead. There is only one exact sequence of teleports that will keep him alive. Back outside, the spectators watch in stunned silence as the giant magical barrier rages with destructive power. Headmaster Meyer Alpheus observes the chaos with a sharp, calculating gaze. This boy from the woods is rewriting the rules of the academy. Lightning arcs across the training grounds in blinding flashes of raw energy. The sheer output of magic rattles the entire courtyard, leaving upperclassmen frozen in disbelief. Chiron is completely shattering expectations. With a final, explosive burst of momentum, Chiron crashes through the finish line. Dust clears across the grounds as the crowd stares at the impossible sight. The impossible has actually happened. Collapsing onto the grass, Chiron gasps for air as exhaustion washes over his entire body. He completely cleared a maze meant for advanced senior students, bypassing level 10 entirely. His mind is spinning from the sheer overload. Whispers ripple through the aristocratic students who once looked down on him with absolute contempt. They can no longer deny his brilliance. Chiron didn't just survive the test, he conquered it with absolute style. Headmaster Alpheus steps forward to address the monumental victory, his expression a mix of deep intrigue and respect. He recognizes the dangerous brilliance burning inside the young commoner. This is the kind of light that shifts eras. As the dust settles, Mark Slider steps up to confront the reality of the situation. He thought his dominance was secure, but Chiron's sudden leap into Class 5 changes the social hierarchy forever. Overwhelmed by the undeniable evidence, Mark and his followers are forced to swallow their immense pride. They offer a public apology, acknowledging that their arrogance was completely misplaced. A commoner has put them in their place. Chiron barely has the energy to process his triumph, practically sleepwalking through the applause. He just wants to find a soft patch of grass and take a very long nap. But his friends are ready to celebrate. Amy watches the exhausted prodigy with a proud, knowing smile, realizing just how far he has come. He kept his promise against impossible odds. The Academy's rigid social ladder is officially starting to crack. With his official promotion to Class 5 locked in, Chiron takes a massive step toward his ultimate goal. Yet high above the grounds, Professor Athella watches from the shadows with a deep sense of unease. Something strange happened inside that maze, and she is determined to figure it out. The Academy's disciplinary committee is in full session following the chaos of the exam. The students who interfered with Chironi's test are sweating bullets, rushing to confess their wrongdoings before the headmaster drops the hammer. Headmaster Meyer Alpheus reviews the fallout with a calm, calculating eye. While the rules demand strict punishment for misconduct, he also recognizes the tangled web of pride and jealousy that push these young nobles to their breaking points. With a heavy strike of the gavel, the verdicts are finalized. Maria and Mark receive suspensions for their reckless actions, while Chiron is also handed a formal penalty for ignoring the safety warnings inside the maze. Back in his room, Chironi is haunted by fragments of what happened inside the dragon's maze. He pushes himself to exhaustion, trying to piece together the terrifying depth of the magic he accidentally unlocked. Suddenly, his consciousness plummets into the abyss of the dragon's maze once more. The boundaries of his mind shatter as he confronts a terrifying truth. His perception expands beyond the physical world, pushing past his own limits. He feels himself dissolving into the very fabric of existence, touching infinity itself. The sheer scale of the revelation threatens to tear his awareness apart before he violently snaps back to reality. Awakening in a cold sweat, Chironi realizes 4 full days have vanished while he was trapped in his own mental landscape. The experience left deep echoes in his mind, feeling less like a dream and more like a profound awakening. Stepping back out into the academy grounds, Chiron runs into Amy, who greets him with her usual energetic warmth. But an accidental mix-up with a notebook full of cute doodles and notes leaves Amy utterly flustered. A month passes quickly at the academy, and Chiron's suspension finally lifts. When he returns to class, his peers treat him with a newfound cautious respect, realizing the quiet commoner is far more dangerous than he looks. As joint classes resume, Amy chats with Chiron about the realities of the advanced classes and the military duties awaiting graduating mages. The heavy burden of the kingdom's magical society hangs over their future paths. The conversation shifts to the upcoming choice of majors as students prepare to enter Class 5. Here, specialized training begins in earnest, and every aspiring mage must decide which branch of magic will define their career. Surrounded by classmates debating trivial topics, Shironi stands apart, quietly absorbing the academic pressure. With advanced spellcasting just around the corner, the real test of his unorthodox abilities is only just beginning. Life at the Alpheus Magic Academy is full of intense lessons, but the students are currently losing their minds over something entirely different. They are locked in a fierce debate about their teachers, specifically trying to figure out which instructor is more attractive. Sharon finds himself awkwardly cornered in the middle of this teenage chaos. Pressured to pick a side in the teacher fan club wars, Chiron sweats under the intense stares of his peers. He plays it safe, prioritizing his academic survival above all else. But before the debate can go any further, an unexpected visitor cuts right through the noisy classroom. It is Yuruki Mercadine, Class 5's infamous outsider, stepping up to greet Shirone with a knowing smile. He remembers the clever mind that helped him during the practical exam, and he is eager to strike up a conversation. Shirone is stunned to find himself acknowledged by someone so eccentric. Yuruki shrugs off the whispers of his classmates, brushing away their concerns with a carefree attitude. He clearly marches to the beat of his own drum, treating the academy rules more like loose suggestions. Shirone watches him walk away, sensing that this strange classmate is capable of unpredictable things. Moments later, the students gather around the image zone for practical spellcasting practice. While everyone else prepares to cast standard spells, Yuruki steps onto the platform with a wild gleam in his eye. The onlookers immediately start shouting, sensing that Yuruki is about to pull another reckless stunt. Without warning, Yuruki unleashes a ferocious torrent of magic at terrifying speeds, completely bypassing the safety protocols. The sheer velocity of his spell sends shockwaves rippling across the entire training grounds. Instructors and students alike watch in absolute horror as the mana spirals completely out of control. Yuruki triggers a massive explosion right in the middle of the courtyard, sending a shockwave that knocks everyone off their feet. The blast shakes the academy foundations, leaving a trail of pure chaos and terrified screams in its wake. It is game over for any peaceful class session today. True to form, Yuruki takes the punishment with a smug grin, earning himself yet another suspension. The faculty are at their wits' end with his antics, but Yuruki remains entirely unfazed by the consequences. Who is this kid, and how is his brain even wired? The truth behind Yuruki's genius lies in a rare condition known as savant syndrome, paired with an astonishing talent for physics calculations. His academic record is a bizarre roller coaster of absolute perfection in science and complete zeros in everything else. He can calculate abstract formulas across centuries, making him a walking calculator. That unique brain makes him completely terrible at literature exams, where emotional interpretation defies cold math. When pressed to explain the feelings behind a falling leaf, Yuruki responds with literal equations about air pressure and blood vessel expansion. His furious teacher snaps and throws him out of the room with a grade of 0. Back with Sharon, the young scholar is working tirelessly to catch up on his own demanding studies. His relentless drive to improve his grades has not gone unnoticed by the upperclassmen, who are starting to take a keen interest in his potential. Soon, Sharon finds himself receiving exclusive invitations to join elite student research groups. Shirone politely declines the generous offers, knowing his foundational knowledge is still too raw to contribute meaningfully. But his refusal only makes him more appealing to ambitious leaders like Amanda, who leads her own specialized team. When Amanda reveals her group's true nature, Shirone's curiosity is instantly hooked. Amanda leads Sharon deep into the academy grounds toward a heavily guarded secret facility known as the Magic Warehouse. This legendary storage building automatically retrieves rare textbooks and historical research papers for its students. As the heavy doors slide open, Sharon steps inside and finds a treasure trove of forbidden knowledge. The interior walls are completely covered in complex magical formulas scribbled by generations of brilliant seniors. Amanda proudly shows off the workspace, and Sharon's eyes widen at the sheer depth of advanced spellcraft surrounding him. This hidden archive is about to open up a whole new world for our ambitious outsider. Sharon wanders deep into the Academy grounds and discovers the legendary Magic Warehouse, a massive mystical vault containing every textbook and resource the school has ever archived. He and his companion navigate the hidden corridors of the warehouse, realizing this incredible treasure trove of knowledge is completely unprotected and accessible to anyone who finds it. Stumbling into a secret research group focused on supernatural psychic science, Shironi finds a group of eccentric students debating wild theories about ghosts, spirits, and alternate realms. The senior researcher Yuruki is busy writing complex atomic formulas on the chalkboard, breaking down matter into its most fundamental building blocks with terrifying precision. Yuruki explains the staggering scale of energy locked inside physical objects, claiming that breaking down the atoms in a single object could unleash enough force to level an entire city. Shirone is horrified by Yuruki's complete disregard for human life, arguing that a true mage must always consider how their destructive magic affects innocent people. Unfazed by the moral debate, Yuruki crushes a cherry between his fingers and scoffs at Shirone's idealism, claiming that geniuses only exist to accomplish monumental feats regardless of the cost. As the argument heats up, Yuruki demonstrates his terrifying talent by instantly calculating complex teleportation mechanics and calculus at a speed that defies normal human comprehension. Yuruki possesses true insight, allowing his conscious mind to process data and react with an intuitive speed that far surpasses traditional knowledge and deliberate calculation. The next day, tension fills the air as the Academy announces the upcoming speed gun test, a high-stakes practical exam where students must rapidly cast spells to hit moving targets. Shirone admits to his teacher that he still doesn't know how to use a single active spell, putting his upcoming advancement test and his entire future at the Academy in severe jeopardy. Determined to break through his bottleneck, Shirone dives into advanced research journals and proposes a radical new approach using photonization theory to manipulate light as an active spell. His teacher is stunned by the sheer ambition of the idea, realizing that mastering photon output could open the doors to an entirely untouched field of magic. Shirone steps outside and attempts to cast his very first active photon spell, but as he channels his energy into the open air, absolutely nothing happens. Out on the 30-second training ground, Class 5 is about to begin practical magic lessons, but when their instructor steps forward, the students are in for a massive shock. Teacher Athela has arrived without her glasses, looking completely different from her usual strict self. The students barely recognize the legendary bishop standing right in front of them. As Athela preps the class, she introduces a special guest to demonstrate advanced techniques. Samuel steps up to the plate, ready to show off his incantation magic mastery. Samuel summons a powerful tornado right before the trembling class. The sheer output of his spell leaves everyone completely breathless and wide-eyed in awe. Samuel decides to push the spell further using traditional incantation magic. He begins reciting a long, poetic chant to amplify the wind's destructive force. The chant drags on so long that the students literally start falling asleep. While the theory is sound, watching a senior recite poetry for 3 minutes is painfully slow. Ithella explains that while incantation magic increases power, it is entirely too slow for practical combat. To fix this, she introduces the secret technique known as the sequence method. To demonstrate, Ithella counts numbers rapidly to organize her spirit zone. Her spirit zone expands exponentially with every digit she rattles off. The sheer scale of her aura blows the students away as her spirit zone multiplies in size. It is a masterclass in precision, speed, and raw magical control. Shirone watches intently, realizing the brilliance behind counting numbers to stabilize focus. If he can group up numbers in his mind, he can bypass the tedious chanting delay entirely. Testing the theory on the spot, Shirone fires up his photon output with blazing speed. He compresses his calculation time down to a staggering 10 seconds flat. Shirone unleashes a blinding burst of magical energy right toward a nearby target tree. The resulting explosion obliterates the area, completely shocking everyone around him. Shirone has just stunned the entire class with an unbelievable display of magic speed and precision. Everyone is staring in absolute disbelief at how fast a supposedly untrained outsider adapted to the training ground. But Chiron is just getting warmed up, ready to push his limits even further. The instructor watches closely as Chiron preps his next spell, noting his mastery over defensive forms and active casting. It is clear that Chiron isn't just copying textbook motions, he is genuinely understanding the core principles behind the magic. The gap between him and the noble students is starting to look awfully thin. Stepping up to the speed gun test, Chiron closes his eyes to center his spirit zone. He runs through the sequence method in his mind, calculating every variable with astonishing mental clarity. The air around him crackles with raw energy as he prepares to unleash a barrage of photon outputs. With a blinding flash of light, Shironi fires off spell after spell with terrifying accuracy. The targets pop up and disappear instantly, but Shironi's photon bullets track them down with ruthless precision. The spectators can only watch in awe as he completely shatters the expected pace of the test. Chiron's score climbs higher and higher as he utilizes advanced modularization methods typically reserved for veteran information magic users. His instructor smiles, recognizing the sheer genius of a boy who refuses to be limited by his background. He is rewriting the rules of spellcasting right in front of their eyes. When the timer finally runs out, the scoreboard flashes a staggering final result of 342 points, with absolute perfection. The courtyard erupts into cheers and gasps, completely floored by the sheer magnitude of Chiron's achievement. He has proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that his talent is the real deal. Seeing Shironi's massive success, Yuruki steps forward with a cool, confident smirk on his face. He is curious about Shironi's unconventional methods, but he's also ready to show everyone how a true prodigy handles the speed gun test. The rivalry between the two brilliant minds is about to reach a boiling point. Yuruki takes his position and immediately activates a deviant form for the test that leaves everyone completely baffled. Instead of relying on standard tracking, he uses pure synesthesia to anticipate the target's movements before they even appear. Shironi watches closely, realizing Yuruki is operating on an entirely different plane of existence. The sheer destructive beauty of Yuruki's magic lights up the arena as beams of concentrated energy sweep across the targets. He isn't just hitting them, he is predicting their trajectory through complex mathematical equations calculated in real time. The crowd is left entirely speechless by the overwhelming display of intellectual dominance. Shironi's eyes widen in sheer disbelief as he tracks Yuruki's blistering pace on the scoreboard. Yuruki is counting intervals in the millions, processing spatial data so fast it defies normal human comprehension. It is a terrifying glimpse into the mind of a true savant. The final buzzer sounds, revealing Yuruki's astronomical score of 548 points with zero time wasted. The entire courtyard falls dead silent before bursting into absolute pandemonium over the broken record. Yuruki casually brushes off the applause, turning his cold gaze directly toward Shironi. Yuruki approaches Shirone with a smug grin, questioning if the commoner boy really thought he could compete with such overwhelming calculations. He casually dismisses Shirone's earlier triumph, claiming that raw insight means nothing without the brute force of advanced math. The condescension drips from every word he speaks. Shirone grits his teeth as Yuruki compares his own massive calculating power to the level of a mere worm. The sheer arrogance of the noble student strikes a raw nerve, pushing Shirone right to the edge of his patience. But instead of backing down, Shirone's eyes flash with fierce, unyielding determination. The speed gun test at Alpheus Magic Academy has become a fierce battleground between Shirone and Yuruki. Yuruki sets a terrifying standard, racking up massive scores with pinpoint accuracy and lightning-fast reflexes that leave the other students in absolute awe. Shirone refuses to fall behind, locking in with total concentration. His unique insight kicks into overdrive as he calculates trajectories with terrifying precision, hitting every target without even needing to turn his head. When the timer hits zero, the scoreboard reveals a staggering result. Shirone has surged right up to Yuruki's level, trailing behind by literally a single point and turning a casual test into an intense rivalry. Yuruki steps up for his next attempt, determined to widen the gap. He unleashes a barrage of magical projectiles at a blinding pace, pushing his spiritual zone to the absolute limit to keep his lead safe. Day after day, the score war continues in an unbroken chain of obsession. Yuruki pushes higher, and Chiron matches him step for step, keeping the deficit locked at exactly one single point, no matter how hard Yuruki tries to shake him. The relentless pressure starts taking a heavy mental toll on Yuruki. Even when he secures a victory, knowing that a commoner outsider is breathing down his neck by a single point feels less like winning and more like being hunted. Away from the training grounds, the academy students gossip about the insane competition. Classmates wonder how Chiron manages to keep pace with Creus's elite without showing a single sign of exhaustion or doubt. Meanwhile, Amy sits outside sipping her drink while discussing the academy rumors with her peers. She knows firsthand how difficult the advanced classes are, but even she is stunned by how fast Chiron is growing. The conversation turns to Yuruki's strange psychological warfare. Amy notes that Yuruki doesn't just cast spells, he deliberately targets his opponent's emotions, weaponizing their mental state to throw them off balance. Back on the training floor, Yuruki shatters the 700-point milestone after an exhausting run. He collapses from the sheer exertion, having poured every ounce of his stamina into breaking past his previous limits. Fellow students rush over to congratulate Yuruki on his monumental score, praising his unmatched prowess. But Yuruki feels no joy because he knows the frustrating truth. Shirone is right there behind him. Amy listens in disbelief as the score is read out loud. Yuruki reached 701 points, a legendary milestone that puts him near the absolute top of the Academy's records. Looking down at the final numbers, Yuruki realizes the horrifying reality of what just happened. Once again, by some impossible margin, Shirone has matched him with a 700-point finish, trailing by that same infuriating single point. As the crowd murmurs in disbelief over Yuruki's seemingly untouchable limits, Shirone stands quietly in the shadows, staring at the scoreboard. A heavy realization hits him. Against a monster like Yuruki, his current strength might finally have reached a wall he cannot climb. Chiron sits alone in his room, staring at the candle flame and wrestling with the towering wall that is Yuruki. He feels like giving up, doubting whether his unconventional approach can ever truly compete with a generational talent. Instead of accepting defeat, Shirone dives deep into his mental landscape, letting numbers guide his perception. He strips away complex thoughts to examine the raw sequence method and basic nature of reality itself. His consciousness plunges into an infinite cosmos of glowing digits, stretching his mind to its absolute limits. The sheer scale of counting everything in existence threatens to overwhelm his senses as he crosses into uncharted territory. A sudden electric shock jolts Shirone back to reality, leaving him gasping for air in his dark room. He realizes he spent an astonishing 40 hours lost inside his own mind, completely detached from the passing time. The next morning, the Alpheus Magic Academy grounds buzz with intense anticipation for the 5-speed gun test. Students from all classes crowd the viewing areas, sensing that something historic is about to unfold. Spectators whisper in shock as upper-class students arrive to watch Chiron and Yuruki square off. The pressure in the arena is palpable, with everyone eager to see how the unorthodox outsider handles the heavy favorite. Cheers erupt as previous groups finish their runs, but all eyes quickly shift toward the final matchup. Classmates call out encouragement as Chiron and Yuruki step forward to claim their positions on the test floor. The referee signals the start, and the arena immediately erupts into a blinding storm of pure magical energy. Yuruki unleashes a terrifying barrage, his spirit zone compressing into a concentrated weapon of absolute destruction. Targets explode across the chamber in rapid succession as both competitors push their magic to the brink. The crowd watches in stunned silence, utterly mesmerized by the sheer spectacle of Yuruki's deviant magic form. To everyone's absolute disbelief, the scoreboard flashes a shocking twist. Chirone's score is actually higher. Yuruki grins wickedly from the stage, revealing that he intentionally paced himself while secretly pushing his limits the entire time. Chirone is pushing his mind to absolute extremes in the magical assessment test, relying on pure calculation to keep pace. Every single number and trajectory must be processed instantly in his head without a single mistake. If he messes up even one sequence in this progression, the entire method collapses. The scoreboard lights up as Shironi fights to maintain his intense focus against staggering odds. Sparks fly around him as he calculates magic at a frightening speed, but the gap in the scores keeps growing wider. The spectators watch in absolute awe as the boy from the outskirts pushes past every expected limit. Yuruki, however, is operating on a completely different level of magical supremacy. Observers realize with a shock that Yuruki is not just fast, he is utilizing a double spirit zone and multiple sequencing methods simultaneously. It is an absurdly rare trait reserved for rare prodigies. Sharon looks up at the staggering score gap and feels the crushing weight of despair. He poured out everything he had, yet Yuruki's overwhelming output makes victory seem impossible. Standing before the swirling torrent of magic, Sharon questions if this is a path he is even allowed to walk. Refusing to give in to fear, Chiron decides to push past his own limitations and transcend the numbers. He reaches deeper into his consciousness, unlocking a level of speed and calculation that leaves the entire audience stunned. The light around him intensifies as he accelerates his mind beyond conventional boundaries. The timer ticks down to its final seconds as Sharon unleashes an unstoppable barrage of calculations. His blue eyes burn with fierce determination as he forces time itself to feel like it is slowing down for him. Every single magical pulse hits its target with terrifying precision. The test ends with a deafening blast of energy that clears the arena. Chiron collapses to the floor, completely drained from the monumental effort he just pulled off. The crowd holds its breath as the final score tally begins to flash on the massive screen. Chiron gasps for air as his classmates rush over to check if he is okay. To everyone's absolute astonishment, the scoreboard reveals a jaw-dropping new record score. Chiron didn't just survive the test, he shattered the ceiling entirely. Yuruki steps forward and extends a hand in mutual respect, cleanly accepting his defeat. Even the proud rival acknowledges that Shironi's explosive talent is something special. However, Shironi immediately spots a suspicious detail about Yuruki's explosive testing method and calls him out on it. Yuruki tries to brush it off, but Shironi presses forward with a serious lecture on the danger of volatile energy. Magic requires a responsible person to control it, not just raw, destructive power. With a sharp look, Shironi demands that Yuruki take responsibility for his reckless methods moving forward. Shirone looks deep into the terrifying core of Yuruki's overwhelming magical presence, realizing the raw fear hiding beneath those eyes. It is not just about raw talent anymore. It is about confronting an untamed monster that threatens to consume everyone around it. Instead of backing down from the intimidation, Chiron reaches out and offers a firm grip, promising to step in if Yuruki ever loses control. The tension in the room instantly shifts as the terrifying standoff transforms into an unexpected pact. The heavy atmosphere shatters completely when teacher Ethella suddenly steps into the room, causing the students to panic. Chiron and his friends scramble as the strict instructor looms over them, demanding to know what crazy experiments they are plotting. Teacher Ethella warns Chiron about the infinite realm he touched, explaining that stepping into that cosmic expanse risks losing his true self. The sheer scale of the concept leaves Chiron reeling as he tries to comprehend the dangerous void he encountered. Back in his dorm room, Chiron wakes up drenched in sweat from the exact same repeating nightmare. The haunting visions of a vast, consuming emptiness continue to plague his sleep, leaving him exhausted and searching for answers. Gathered with his friends, Chiron tries to make light of his bizarre sleep disturbances while describing the impossible space he floated through. He explains how a single thread of light seemed to oscillate across a dark, formless expanse. Yuruki listens closely and immediately connects Chirone's wild description to forbidden historical records regarding quantum physics and the human soul. The conversation spirals into deep academic territory as they discuss phenomena beyond normal comprehension. They dive into radical theories about souls being ionized and electromagnetic forces pulling the consciousness of the entire world inward. Chiron realizes with a shock that his physical sensations perfectly match these extreme scientific models. The realization hits Chironi like a bolt of lightning. His mind is tapping into the immortal function, a mythical mathematical realm where anything is possible. His friends marvel at the sheer absurdity and brilliance of the breakthrough. With a newfound sense of confidence and plenty of laughter, Chiron officially decides to join their eccentric research group. They celebrate the addition of their newest member, ready to dive headfirst into dangerous intellectual pursuits. Chiron slips his application into the pile, hoping the strict academy teachers won't notice their infamous club growing in numbers. But little do they know, an unexpected figure is already watching their every move. At the Alpheus Magic Academy, administrative paperwork piles up as teachers sort through the various student clubs. One particular application catches an instructor's attention, and the name on the form immediately rings alarm bells. Elsewhere, teacher Sienna sits down for tea with another faculty member to discuss the chaotic state of the Academy's student organizations. The talk quickly turns to the infamous Supernatural Psychic Science Research Group and its unpredictable members. Back at the research group's chaotic hideout, Chiron is nowhere to be found, leaving his eccentric peers to pass the time with games and inventions. Nade shows off his latest magical contraption, an invisible cloak that leaves everyone amazed. Teacher Sienna voices deep concerns to her colleague, pointing out that Chirona's involvement with dangerous radicals could drag the entire school down. If a top student joins such an unstable group, the consequences could be disastrous. Nade proudly displays an entire collection of volatile magic grenades and electromagnetic gadgets. While it looks impressive, the sheer danger level has the others questioning how long they can avoid blowing themselves up. While rummaging through the club's archive books, Shironi stumbles upon something totally unexpected. He flips open a page to find scandalous illustrations and gossip records detailing the personal lives of senior students. Shironi panics at the sheer audacity of what the club has been documenting right under the school's nose. Running a secret intelligence network disguised as a research group is a guaranteed ticket to serious trouble. Faculty discussions continue as the head instructor weighs the pros and cons of intervening in student affairs. Allowing kids the freedom to choose their own path also means letting them face the consequences of their mistakes. Sienna reveals a stunning update on Chiron's academic progress, noting that his recent training milestones have reached an incredible level of clarity. Her colleague is left completely speechless by how fast the young outsider is evolving. Suddenly, a thunderous tremor shakes the academy grounds as a surprise inspection gets underway. Panic instantly sets in as the club members realize a teacher is storming the warehouse right now. The door flies open with a deafening bang, revealing Sienna standing in the doorway with a piercing glare. She stares down the frantic students who are desperately trying to hide their illegal gadgets. With a cold, unyielding expression, Sienna looks over the incriminating mess spread across the room. She delivers a chilling ultimatum that spells immediate doom for the club's continued existence. Teacher Sienna walks into the club room with harsh news, ready to shut down Chiron's research group entirely. The students scramble to defend their work, but Sienna points out they have barely met the bare minimum academic requirements. Panic sets in as the students realize their entire research group is about to be erased. Nade drops to his knees, begging for mercy and offering to do absolutely anything to save their project. Sienna drops the real hammer, declaring that Chiron must be dismissed from the group immediately. The others are stunned, remembering how dangerous Chiron's recent magical breakdown truly was. Sienna explains the terrifying mechanics of an overflow, where a mind overwhelmed by sudden magical awakening starts to crumble. It is a mental breakdown so severe that many young students never recover. Shironi insists he can handle the intensive mental therapy and refuses to let his friends take the fall. He views his obsession not as a disease, but as a driving force he needs to embrace. Facing Sienna's stern gaze, Chiron stands his ground and confesses he is actually not afraid of the nightmare. He wants to confront his inner secrets rather than running away from them forever. Moved by his unwavering resolve, Sienna finally backs down and agrees to respect Chiron's choice. The research group is safe, but they have just 1 month to produce real, tangible results. Walking outside into the city streets, the group panics over having zero records of past presentations. Suddenly, Nade spots Sienna dressed up in civilian clothes and heading somewhere suspicious. Convinced that Sienna is sneaking out to meet a man, Nade hatches a wild scheme to tail her. If they can discover her personal weakness, they can use it as leverage to protect their research group. Sharon and his friends slip into a residential zone to track down their teacher, assuming she has gone to meet a secret romantic partner. They peek around corners with matching conspiratorial grins, completely convinced they are on the trail of a scandalous academy romance. But when they sneak up to her door, they realize they have stepped into something far more confusing than expected. Convinced their teacher is in grave danger or tangled in a forbidden affair, the boys decide to breach the room. They force the lock open and burst through the threshold, ready to rescue her from whomever is inside. Chiron leads the charge, his heart pounding as they tumble in with dramatic flair. They throw open the door shouting warnings, only to freeze dead in their tracks at what they see. Their teacher, Sienna, is sitting on the bed in a flowing white dress, looking thoroughly startled by the sudden home invasion. The boys gawk in absolute shock, their heroic rescue instantly transforming into the most humiliating misunderstanding of their lives. Sienna is furious, immediately reading them the riot act for breaking into a private home and leaping to wild conclusions. She stands over them as they kneel in shame, lecturing them on boundaries and basic common sense. Yet beneath her scolding, there is a warm affection that proves she cares deeply for her rebellious students. The blind upperclassman Armin arrives with tea, diffusing the tension with his gentle smile and easygoing grace. He explains how he and Sienna crossed paths years ago, turning the chaotic confrontation into a quiet moment of reflection. Shironi watches him closely, feeling an odd, heavy sensation in his head as he studies the mysterious senior. Armin's past is wrapped in tragedy, tracing back to the days when he and Sienna were young magic students. A devastating flashback reveals a young Sienna caught in a dangerous mana overflow during a raging storm. The wild energy spun out of control, threatening to sweep her away in the rising floodwaters. Young Armin threw himself into the raging current without a second thought to save Sienna from the abyss. He fought against the overwhelming pressure of the water, determined to keep her afloat even as the magic tore through his own senses. They survived the river, but the price Armin paid was absolute. The mana overflow took Armin's sight forever, ending his journey as a combat mage in an instant. Unable to walk the path of traditional spellcasting anymore, he turned his immense talent toward art instead. Sienna has looked after him ever since, carrying the quiet guilt of the accident in her heart. Back in the present, Armin sits at his easel, painting a portrait while blindfolded with effortless precision. The students watch in utter disbelief, trying to wrap their heads around how someone with no eyesight can capture canvas details so perfectly. Sharone realizes Armin is using his spirit zone to map the room, seeing the world through pure perception. Armin suddenly stops sketching and turns his bandaged face directly toward Chiron, with a knowing smile. He asks if Chiron can truly see what he is doing, cutting straight through the boy's inner defenses. Chiron's eyes widen in sheer terror as Armin's true spiritual power ignites, revealing a terrifying genius hiding beneath the calm facade. Chiron finds himself face to face with Mr. Armin in a quiet, shadowy room, and something about the man's presence instantly sets his instincts on edge. He stares in disbelief as Mr. Armin speaks with a calm, casual familiarity, making it obvious he has been waiting for this exact meeting. Mr. Armin calmly drops a massive revelation, explaining that Chiron experienced the legendary spell called Stop. Chiron's mind races as he realizes the sheer impossibility of what he witnessed, because that kind of magic operates right at the absolute limit of light speed. Instead of keeping Chiron in the dark, Mr. Armin reveals his own hidden truth by removing his blindfold. He shares the same profound experience with the immortal function, realizing that Chiron possesses the exact same rare gift. The immortal function acts as a doorway straight into infinity, a vast mental space that unlocks immense power for those brave enough to peer inside. Mr. Armin warns him of the terrifying risks, noting that unlocking this door can easily shatter an untrained mind. Shironi admits that every single night in his dreams, he feels like he is drifting out into the cold expanse of outer space. Mr. Armin listens with a knowing smile, recognizing that the boy is naturally loved by magic itself. Mr. Armin breaks down the heavy anxiety that plagues unlockers, explaining that encountering the true infinity of space often sparks deep terror. However, Chiron's fear feels entirely different, pointing toward a much deeper mystery hidden within his soul. Sharon struggles to find the right words for the formless concept echoing inside his thoughts, wondering if it connects to the strings of fate. Mr. Armin suggests it might be related to gauge symmetry, the fundamental laws of physics that hold reality together. Deep down, the universe is not entirely perfect, and someone long ago broke that pristine symmetry to create the magic they use today. Mr. Armin places deep trust in Shironi, convinced that the young woodcutter's son has what it takes to bring those hidden truths to light. Before parting ways, Mr. Armin asks Chiron to keep their profound discussion a strict secret from everyone else, especially Sienna. Chiron agrees, though he feels a pang of guilt about keeping such monumental truths hidden from his teacher. As the students prepare to leave the academy grounds, Mr. Armin exchanges final pleasantries with the group, making sure everyone stays focused on their studies. He watches Sienna with a quiet gentleness, hoping she will eventually find a way to live free from her lingering regrets. The dramatic farewell is suddenly interrupted in spectacular fashion as a flamboyant, red-haired woman crashes the scene with overwhelming energy. She barrels into Mr. Armin with a comical fury, complaining loudly about being left behind while he was busy shopping. With the chaotic arrival of the fiery newcomer, Mr. Armin issues a quiet, urgent warning about upcoming moves and tight schedules. He knows their time in crease is running out fast, and big changes are looming on the horizon. Meanwhile, teacher Sienna walks through the town with a heavy heart, her feelings completely tangled up in worry over the disbanding research group. The students try to cheer her up by planning a lavish meal to eat away their sorrows. Determined to lift Sienna's spirits, the group hatches a bold plan to splurge on the most expensive things on the menu and drink their worries away. But 2 hours later, the plan backfires spectacularly, as Sienna turns out to be an absolute lightweight who completely loses control. Sienna is completely losing control at the dinner table, downing cognitive cognac like it is water. The students can only watch in horror as their teacher goes completely off the rails. Flashback 2 hours earlier, and Sienna was already demanding drinks despite her students trying to hold back. They pour her a glass, little knowing what kind of monster they are unleashing. Sharon tries to pull a fast one using schema to cheat at a drinking test, but Sienna spots him instantly. She punishes him with a vicious cheek pinch that leaves the poor boy begging for mercy. Once the alcohol fully kicks in, Sienna becomes a totally different person, affectionately squishing her students' cheeks. She confesses her deepest insecurities, crying that she feels like a bad teacher who cannot help them achieve their dreams. The emotional breakdown ends abruptly when Sienna faceplants straight into the hot pot. The boys freeze in absolute panic, scrambling to pull their unconscious teacher out of the steaming broth. While they try to figure out the bill, arrogant nobles approach and treat the situation as an invitation to harass the passed out teacher. They grab Sienna inappropriately, thinking nobody is around to stop them. Sharon grabs the attacker's hand with chilling fury in his eyes, telling him to let go. When the noble threatens to have them all expelled, Sharon unleashes raw magical pressure that makes the grown men tremble. Yuruki casually tosses a wallet right at the official's face, demanding he back off. The noble looks at the identification and realizes he just tried to shake down a member of the elite Mercadine family. Terrified of the Mercadine name, the officials crash backward in pure panic and scurry away into the night. Chiron and the boys decide to head back, laughing off the disaster while Chiron carries Sienna on his back. Yuruki takes a Polaroid snapshot of Sienna's drunken state to use as blackmail to protect their research group. But Shironi suddenly stops, realizing this is the perfect moment to test schema and look deep inside his own mind. Yuruki tries to guide Shirone through the mental plane with trick questions, but Shirone effortlessly turns the tables and tricks him right back. Even inside his own mind, Shirone refuses to be easily fooled. Back under the moonlight, the boys discuss how hard it is to protect Sienna from her own weaknesses. They resolve to handle their club's survival entirely on their own terms, without burdening her. Sienna miraculously wakes up the next day, shouting in embarrassment as she realizes what happened. Instead of punishing them, a grinning Sienna gives their research group another full month to prove themselves. A few days later, the academy hallways are buzzing with absolute shock. Sharon, Yuruki, and their quirky club have officially plastered ghost hunting posters everywhere, turning the entire school upside down. 10 days before the big presentation, the student research group is completely stuck. They are supposed to present something about supernatural psychic science, but nobody can think of any usable topics that actually exist in real life. Chiron and his teammates stare at mountains of rejected notes and crumpled paper. Everything they've tried to research either sounds like a complete joke or is completely invisible to prove. Frustration boils over as Chironing complains about how hard it is to fake a ghost. That sparks a sudden realization among the group about how people perceive the supernatural in the first place. Instead of trying to force actual evidence into existence, Chiron suggests a brilliant psychological trick. They just need to manipulate how people believe they are seeing things. Yuruki jumps on the idea, suggesting they use continuous lightning shadows to create an eerie, moving phantom. If they run it dozens of times a second, it will look completely real. Chirone pushes the concept further by proposing a behavioral prediction program. By mapping out how people react to unexpected scares, they can time the hologram's movements perfectly. The puzzle pieces fall into place as Chirone realizes he has the photon output needed to pull it off. Combined with Yuruki's programming, they can build the ultimate artificial ghost. Working through the night, the duo sketches out the complex mechanics and calculations required for the grand illusion. Every detail is mapped out to flip the entire school upside down. With the plan locked in, Yuruki starts building the program while Chirone prepares his photon output. There is just one terrifying catch. The sheer amount of energy required is astronomical. 10 days later, the posters go up across the academy grounds, creating an immediate buzz among the student body. The hype surrounding their mysterious presentation is spreading like wildfire. Even the students outside their group are stunned by the sheer scale of the attention they are getting. At least half the entire school population is expected to show up to watch. As the countdown reaches 17 days before the big event, students begin walking toward the presentation hall in droves. The excitement in the corridors is palpable. Meanwhile, rival shadow research groups lurk in the shadows, whispering about what will happen if Chiron and Yuruki fail. If their presentation bombs, their research room will be revoked forever. Chironi is pushing his mental training to absolute extremes, using a brutal method called mental rebound to force his photon output higher. He repeats the exhausting cycle of intense focus and recovery over and over, dangerously close to breaking his own consciousness. With only a week left until the big research presentation, Chiron refuses to slow down despite his friends worrying about his frantic pace. He is determined to pull off something extraordinary, even if it means running on pure adrenaline and exhaustion. His relentless drive eventually catches up with his teammates, leaving Yuruki completely overworked and collapsing from the sheer pressure. But Chirone is too wired to stop, staring at his prototype equipment with a manic look that says he is past the point of reasoning. Chiron tests out the light cable prototype, channeling an incredible surge of photon energy directly into the sphere. The resulting burst of brilliant illumination leaves everyone in the room utterly stunned by the raw output he managed to generate. Days later, the day of the presentation finally arrives, and the academy grounds are completely flooded with eager students and curious onlookers. Flyers are being handed out everywhere, advertising the mysterious research project put together by Chiron and his group. Word of the presentation has spread like wildfire, drawing in heavy hitters from the upper classes who normally wouldn't give a Class 5 project a second look. Elite seniors and top students start packing the venue out of pure curiosity. Even the most notorious prodigies and elite academy figures are spotted walking into the auditorium to see what the buzz is about. The tension in the air is palpable as whispers sweep through the massive crowd, filling every single seat. High above the crowd, even Headmaster Meyer Alpheus takes a seat with an amused grin, eager to see what his favorite unconventional student has cooked up. The headmaster's presence turns a simple classroom project into a major academy event. The lights dim and the spotlight hits the stage as the long-awaited supernatural psychic science research supersection finally gets underway. Chiron steps forward into the glow, ready to shock the entire academic hierarchy. The Grand Alpheus Magic Academy auditorium is packed to the brim as the Supernatural Psychic Science Research Group takes center stage. Madeline West stands at the microphone, ready to deliver a presentation that promises to shake up the entire student body. But before the main event begins, the organizers flash a dramatic warning across the hall for anyone easily startled. Madeline dives straight into the eerie history of the Academy grounds, taking the audience back 250 years. He details how the tranquil campus was once a notorious slash and burn village, torn apart by a brutal historical conflict. During the infamous Conquest War, desperate civilians flooded into the surrounding dark forests to escape the carnage. The speaker paints a grim picture of innocent refugees being hunted down by evil spirits and lurking horrors in the woods. Dramatic reenactments flash across the stage with flashing lights and sudden loud noises, startling the students in the front rows. Yet some audience members just find the theatrical presentation amusing rather than terrifying. Suddenly, Madeline calls out for his missing assistant, shouting for Alia to hurry up and make her entrance. The spotlight swings across the stage, and stepping out of the shadows comes a gorgeous, elegant figure in a flowing white dress. The crowd gasps as the beautiful volunteer calls out for Noah, looking completely radiant under the stage lights. Wait a second. That gorgeous lady in the white dress is actually Shirone in full cross-dressing disguise. Amy loses her absolute mind in the audience, grabbing her companion in a panic while watching Shirone play his part. Meanwhile, Shirone bounds forward with dramatic flair and leaps right into a theatrical embrace with Madeline on stage. The playful skit instantly spirals into a terrifying staged nightmare right in front of the horrified students. Madeline and Chiron act out a brutal ambush, simulating a violent attack that sends shockwaves through the auditorium. The realistic acting is so convincing that teachers and students alike grip their seats in absolute dread. As the fake struggle settles, Madeline holds up an ancient journal discovered in the Academy archives 6 months ago. He leans into the microphone to explain the dark secret behind the Midnight Bell Tower. According to the old research, corrupt souls of the damned linger in the halls, awakening precisely when the clock strikes 12. Madeline casually warns the students that tonight, thanks to an invisible soul frequency attunement, they might actually spot some spirits roaming about. The audience mutters nervously, wondering if the eccentric researcher is just trying to creep them out. With a final wave, Madeline wraps up the presentation as the auditorium lights flicker back on. The moment the lights return, the crowd realizes there was no grand magical conclusion or verified phenomenon at all. Disappointed students start booing loudly, feeling like they just wasted an hour of their lives on a prank. Amy buries her face in her hands from sheer embarrassment, groaning at ever-trusting Sharon's weird ideas. Up in the faculty section, Headmaster Meyer Alpheus and the instructors look over the disgruntled crowd with knowing smiles. The elderly headmaster chuckles, noting that stirring up the students is half the fun of running a magic academy. He figures that even if the presentation fell flat, it definitely succeeded in waking everyone up. Back behind the scenes, Chiron and Madeline celebrate the roaring crowd reaction with fist bumps and hearty laughs. The dramatic stunt played the audience like a fiddle, getting exactly the emotional response they wanted. Madeline grins widely, confident that their master plan is rolling forward without a single hitch. Shironi looks out over the departing students with a sharp, calculating gleam in his eye. The seed has been successfully planted in their minds, setting the stage for the next phase of their grand design. With a confident smirk, Shironi declares that the ghosts are about to make their real appearance. The midnight hour has finally arrived at the Alpheus Magic Academy. Chiron stands ready in the experimental chamber, steeling his mind for the intensive magic test ahead. Outside, an intricate web of hologram projectors comes to life across the Academy grounds. The stage is set for their grand illusion experiment. With the countdown ticking down to midnight, the team runs final checks on the equipment. Every variable must align perfectly for the magic projection to succeed. Chiron unleashes a tremendous surge of magical output, sending brilliant pillars of light soaring into the night sky. The sheer scale of his power stuns everyone in the control room. Suddenly, the monitoring gauges stall out, refusing to climb any higher. Panic sets in as the output starts behaving erratically, threatening to derail the entire operation. The machinery begins to fail, and the team watches in despair as the numbers flatline. It looks like all their grueling preparation has culminated in a complete breakdown. Refusing to accept defeat, Shirone pushes past his limits and activates a dangerous technique. He plunges straight into the depths of his own consciousness to force the magic forward. Inside his mindscape, suppressed memories and fragmented past lives begin to flash before his eyes. Chiron fights to maintain his sense of self against the overwhelming torrent of power. A blinding shockwave erupts as Chiron breaks through the mental barrier, sending his magical energy skyrocketing past all previous records. The sheer magnitude forces the gauges to redline. With the system fully stabilized and operating at peak performance, the hologram network fires up across the academy. The midnight hour strikes, signaling the start of the grand illusion. Inside the dormitories, resting students suddenly find themselves jolted awake by eerie sights outside their windows. Terrifying spectral projections begin creeping along the academy walls. Ghastly figures manifest right outside the glass, sending the female students into an absolute panic. The chilling holograms look entirely too real to handle in the dark. Chaos erupts through the hallways as terrified students flee in absolute terror from the invading phantoms. Chiron's brilliant prank has successfully turned the entire academy upside down. The Midnight Academy grounds turn into an absolute horror show as terrifying specters materialize out of nowhere. Students scream in sheer panic, scattering in every direction as the phantom horde closes in. It looks like a genuine haunting, but beneath the terror, something much more calculated is unfolding. Before the chaos can spiral completely out of control, the terrifying ghosts suddenly vanish into thin air. The stunned crowd catches its breath, realizing the spooky spectacle has completely evaporated. Then, from the rooftop above, a round of applause echoes through the courtyard. Chirone and his research group reveal themselves as the masterminds behind the entire midnight stunt. An irate instructor storms forward demanding answers, but Chirone's team is ready with a bold defense. They claim the entire terrifying display was nothing more than an elaborate hologram projection. Skeptical students immediately shout that the trick is impossible and demand proof of how it was done. Headmaster Meyer Alpheus steps into the spotlight with a warm smile, endorsing the students' bold presentation. He points out that the true magic lies in the method, regardless of whether ghosts are real. Chiron steps up to explain the deeper philosophy driving their supernatural science research. He argues that the real objective was never about proving ghosts exist, but about confronting uncertainty itself. By planting the seed of doubt, they force the entire audience to question their own perceptions. The presentation officially concludes to a mix of stunned silence and roaring applause from the impressed onlookers. Even the strictest instructors have to admit the project accomplished its goal of challenging conventional thought. Chiron's brilliant strategy completely upends expectations once again. Victory comes with a hilarious price when the faculty hands down a 3-day suspension for the Midnight Chaos. Back at their base, the research group celebrates their wild success despite the temporary punishment. Chiron's clever resourcefulness continues to cement his legendary status among his peers. Observing from the shadows, rival factions watch Chiron's rising influence with a mixture of envy and quiet malice. While friends celebrate his genius, unseen adversaries begin plotting their next moves against him. Chiron's journey through the academy is about to face even deadlier trials.